Hey, what's going on, everybody? Daryl and I were just joking around a little bit beforehand. So we got a really good show for you tonight. We're going to have a first look at Ahsoka. We got some franchise news that's supposed to come next week. We're going to see what our favorite Luke Skywalker moment is. Remember last time I think we did Darth Vader. We're going to pit Naboo up against Coruscant. We're going to see which place we would rather live. But of course, first, we got some High Republic news. The High Republic era may be bigger than we think. There's more stories coming, and we're going to cover that right after this.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. And as usual, we're live.
Yes, sir.
So feel free to start chatting in at any time.
Live and living color.
Yeah, exactly. So what have you been doing this week? I always ask that.
Yeah, it's been a pretty busy week, but, it's also an unfortunate thing. My cousin's actually dealing with the coronavirus. I know we just heard about the president, but...
Yep, and at the same time, my boss's wife.
Oh, wow. Really?
Got it, yeah.
Yeah, it's been crazy.
He sent an email today, and, everybody's been kind of like, we've been all hanging around each other.
Yeah, exactly. So he's in the hospital. He also has pneumonia, too, so it's been kind of a hairy situation for him.
That kind of sucks,
yeah.
man. Well, and that just goes to show you, though, because we think that we're getting through this, and productions and everything is starting to ramp up, and especially in the world of Star Wars, things haven't really seemed to slow down very much.
Right, yeah. I mean, that's the thing, a lot of things in Star Wars are kind of still moving ahead, and even there's a lot of productions here in the city of Detroit. They've covered some things here on the news, and we've seen like different production errors. Don Cheadle and I know Jason Momoa was here the other day. Yeah, I was going to say
Jason. Well, he seems to actually really love Ferndale for some reason. I guess he's like a regular visitor there.
Yeah, he loves Ferndale for whatever reason. Probably because of the different restaurants and stuff like that. But then
I could see that.
Like Don Cheadle, they're doing a retro-ish movie, so they're using like a lot of the old cars that you would see from the Dream Cruise here in Detroit.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of people have been like volunteering and donating their vehicles for that particular film. So, yeah, but as far as Star Wars, things are still moving along.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And a lot of times you don't really feel it because we've been getting Star Wars news left and right.
Yeah, and we're actually, 29 days almost?
Yes.
From The Mandalorian?
Yes, The Mandalorian. Now we can actually say that The Mandalorian premieres this month.
Yes.
But before we get into The Mandalorian, what do you say we take care of a little bit of High Republic news first?
Yeah, why don't we?
All right, let's do it. All right, so we are on our main topic. So for those of you guys who don't know, or maybe this is the first time you've watched the show or whatever, this is where we do our main topic. So this is probably the reason why you clicked. And I see Ronaldo has already chatted in.
Yeah, he says, hello, guys. My best wishes for your relatives. Thanks, Ronaldo. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, man. Because, on a related note, not that I want to dwell on all this or whatever, but this is actually kind of a funny story. And since my mom often watches and listens to the show, this is kind of funny. So I came home from work yesterday.
It sounds like a funny story already.
It is. Yeah. I came home from work. Oh, wait. Jason, he says hi.
Hey, Jason.
Hey. So, okay. This is great. I mean, it's not really funny, actually, but it's just kind of funny.
Okay.
So I came home from work, and my parents are with me, so they weren't actually at home. So I'm like, okay, whatever. It's not really unusual. I start watching a movie. I've been trying to watch a horror movie a day. So last night was 30 Days of Night. Classic movie.
Love it.
I mean, it's actually one of my favorite vampire movies, and I think it's totally underrated. But
definitely.
Everything was cool, and then I heard him come home, and then by the time that, I went downstairs or whatever, they were already in bed, so I didn't think anything of it. I checked my Facebook post this morning. My mom's talking about how she was in the hospital, and she had fallen, and they did x-rays, and then they found a spot on her lung, and it's like, yeah, like all this stuff, and, people at work were like, hey, man, how's your mom doing? I'm like, dude, I don't know. I only saw this. Like, I found out like you did.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's
I
amazing.
say that to say thank you, Ronaldo, for, thinking of our relatives and stuff. Because, I mean, even though we like to unwind and talk about Star Wars and all that, a lot of times real life
Yeah.
It's right outside that door, man, and it can.
Yeah, it can
I mean,
definitely
it
kick
you
you in
know,
the pants sometimes.
it
so.
does. It really does. But so we got some more stories for the High Republic. I mean, the High Republic is such a funny thing because a lot of times you either get nothing or you just get a bunch of stuff dropped on you.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, this time, well, first of all, for those who are unfamiliar, the High Republic kind of takes place 200 years before the events of the Phantom Menace, and it's pretty much kind of how they're depicting it is the High Republic era of the Jedi. Everything's all pristine. Everything's kind of in this almost glory days, and you don't have any Sith Lords because at that time they're still believed to be extinct. But one of the authors and one of the champions of and also one of the writers of the High Republic era, Charles Sewell, he says that he has a lot of stories and he's not really done with it. Actually, one of his quotes is, "This is all the stuff you know, but here's something you don't. I'm not done with this era of Star Wars by a long shot. The High Republic is planned as a multi-year mega story, and I intend to be part of it. I've already got a few projects set for it, with more to come. I'm sure the High Republic is a very cool space to which to play, and I think I have some great stories to tell."
Hey, all right, and we got Boatwright Family and Comics. They actually, I don't know, he, she, whatever, but they basically commented on one of our, I think last week's show.
Okay.
I hope I can actually talk.
Yeah.
I've been having a terrible time with the English language today, and we're only at the beginning of the show, but they say, "Good evening, everyone. It's great to have you aboard, joining our little community. We hope to actually do a lot of really cool discussion back and forth, so the more people that jump in, the better." But this is what I find really strange about this High Republic quote that he just said.
Okay.
He's all like, "Oh, we're not done yet. We're not done." It's like, dude, we haven't even started. Like, nothing has been released in this thing yet. I mean, I get it from what he's talking about. We are, after all, in from a certain point of view. And from his point of view, I think that maybe he wrote a bunch of his stories already. And he's just trying to tell us, like, look, man, I'm not done. My involvement isn't like a one and done kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's good to hear the word planned.
That's something that you don't usually hear in Star Wars very often, actually.
So I'm glad to hear that word being tossed around.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's one of those things that because the High Republic is so new and because we know very little about it, if you think about it, because remember, we were actually supposed to get something like, what, a couple of months ago? Or actually more than that, wasn't it June?
It was actually like back in the summertime. We were actually supposed to get the first ones, but now I think it's been pushed back to January, maybe early February.
Yeah, well, I know it was January. I think it was January.
January, yeah. So, I mean, and
Which, by the way, Cobra Kai Season 3, January 8th, I believe.
Oh, I can't wait.
I know. But I digress.
Yes. Please don't distract me.
I won't. I know. I'm sorry, man.
But no, I mean, like, the thing is with the High Republic is that I'm really interested because this is actually a space where it's uncharted. You do have someone that we're familiar with. Yoda is definitely around during this period. How much we will see of him, we don't know. But I'm really curious to see the landscape and where they're going with this. Like, what are the issues of the galaxy in that particular time? What are the rules of the Jedi? Have they changed over? Because this is 200 years before the Phantom Menace. So a lot can change in 200 years as far as theology, ideology. Are we going to get the beginnings of some things that we've heard before? And now we're going to see where that comes from, like no attachments. Maybe this is where we find that out. There's a lot of different things as far as the Force is concerned, because now, you have so many different avenues where you have Jedi who are kind of specializing in different things. I've kind of gleaned that from some of the articles and things that I've read.
Well, let me just stop you there for a second, because you actually raised a really good point that I never really occurred to me, is that we could actually, during this era, find out the origin of some of this Jedi dogma that we've come to know that we just assumed was around for, let's just say, since the Old Republic or whatever, or even since the beginning. Because unlike the Sith, this is an important point, guys, unlike the Sith, we don't actually know. Like, we know that Darth Bane established the rule of two. And we know some things about the Jedi. Like, they've come out, oh, the first Jedi this, or, they might show some prominent guy from, some period or whatever. And we know some of the Old Republic stuff as well. But we don't know when some of these rules, like you brought up the attachments. Jason.
Yeah.
I think that the no attachments guideline has been around for a very long time. Yeah, but the problem is we don't know when, though.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there could have been a comic, including in new canon. I've read most of them. Well, I mean, I've read a lot of them, but there's a lot that I haven't read. And I know sometimes there's, like Jason, for instance, will bring up certain things that, maybe I forgot about, like read once, and I'm like, oh, yeah, he's right. Or I've never even known. I mean, it's like...
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a lot of different things. Like, we've known that these things have been around for a long time. I mean...
Yeah, but 200 years is a long time.
I was just about to say that. Like, 200 years is a long time.
And that's when the High Republic, actually takes place, so... Exactly.
And then there's other rules, and there's, different things that are created. Like, we don't know when some of the lightsaber forms were created, because especially, when you're looking at a lot of the different lightsaber creations as far as the hilts, it's like, okay, well, why did they design them that way? Because a lot of them have that old, like, King Arthur rustic, vibe. So maybe there's lightsaber forms that kind of are more conducive for those types of...
Maybe, but I have to wonder, because that's a good point, too. When does it transition from what we're seeing in the High Republic to what we know now?
Yeah, and then, of course, like, our biggest question is, like, okay, Yoda, all right, if he isn't the head of the Jedi Council, well, who is, and why isn't Yoda the head at that point?
Well, and I know we touched on this on one of our shows before, where it was kind of like we're still a little bit fuzzy on how that particular species actually ages, because we know like 50 years is a toddler and 900 years is apparently somewhat old, but we don't really know. Like, I remember we went into great lengths on that, whichever show it was. It wasn't
that long
ago. Yeah, it was a fairly recent show. And I remember it was one of those things where it was like, when is middle age? Like, when in that species, when is compared to like a human 20-year-old, let's say,
like
or 25
400 years or something.
Yeah, exactly. But when's like 40? When's 60? You know what I mean? It's like, unless we know that, because for all we know, 200 years ago, so Yoda would be maybe like 600-700 years old.
Before, well, I guess...
Because he was around 900.
900 in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of like, okay, you factor in like... So, there's probably about 35 or so years between that and the Phantom Menace. So, you figure maybe roughly late 600s.
Right.
Maybe early 700s. The point is, you make a good point. I mean, he had to have been old enough to be wise enough. So why wasn't he on the council? I mean, we don't necessarily know that he wasn't on the council.
I probably will bet that he was on the council, but if he's
why isn't he not the head of the council?
That's the question.
And only 200 years is not that much time for him. And obviously, by the time of the Phantom Menace, he's probably been there for a while. It wasn't like he was just inducted or just installed or something.
Yeah.
And then you got to wonder where Mace Windu fits into all this, too. Like, when does he come along? Now, we know that he's more of a humanoid male. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, he's probably like, what, maybe in his 50s, 40s? And
probably late 40s, early 50s. But see, this makes me wonder, though. Like, okay, so we know of Yaddle, right?
Right.
We know of Yoda.
Kind of.
I mean, what I'm saying, like, we know that she's another
She's another one, man. I'm wondering, who is she?
But what I'm saying is that, okay, so now we have, quote unquote, baby Yoda right now.
Right.
In the Mandalorian era. So I wonder if we'll see another, like, what if that person is not Yoda, but it might be, or could be Yoda, but it could be like there could be another person of his species running the council at the same time.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's the thing. There's so much we don't know. And the funny thing is that we already know that there's something like, I think they said 4 books.
Yeah.
That were coming out. And then they were announcing that, okay, there might be more comics or something like that. Because the big question for this whole High Republic thing is, when is it going to transition into television and movies?
Yeah, and that's the thing that I feel like is really going to rebirth Star Wars, honestly, is because now you can tell these stories that's leading up to, let's say, Phantom Menace, but you don't have to bump up against it because you have so much time. You have 200 years, so you don't have to skip and say 100 years later. You can say even 20 years later, and you still wouldn't be even near the Phantom Menace. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, you are getting a little close because 200 years is not a whole lot of time. It's only a couple of generations.
Yeah, but I mean, like a lot.
I know what you're saying. It's just that it makes me wonder why they went this route instead of going the Old Republic route. That's all.
And maybe they still will. I think maybe that's just left up to
Oh,
someone.
I have no
That
doubt.
might be, what's his face's trilogy?
Ryan Johnson.
Ryan Johnson. Ronaldo says, well, first of all, Jason says, I would love to see the creation of Form 6. Yes. Talking about lightsaber Form 6.
Wouldn't we all?
I know, right? And then Ronaldo says, in the High Republic trailer, there's a mention that there's something that scares the Jedi. For me, that's the biggest question. And how the Nahi, I can't see the words exactly, are dangerous for the Jedi.
Yeah, that's another species that I'm almost wondering. There's a species that was basically, it was spelled almost the Nogri. That's what they were. They were from like the first trilogy, Heir to the Empire, stuff like that.
Ronaldo also asked, by the way, did you read the comic preview?
No.
I was like,
I knew it was coming. I knew that it was coming out, but I missed it.
I didn't even hear about that one. That's cool.
Yeah.
I've never heard of
Get all your Star Wars news here, folks.
Well,
what was that?
I've never heard of like a comic.
Well,
that's when he said trailer at first. I was like, huh?
I know. But I mean, I thought maybe he meant the comic, but I wasn't sure. But yeah, because when he said trailer, I'm like,
yeah, I was like, I really missed something. I'm like, we just got the Mandalorian like 2 minutes ago. So
yeah, I know. Well, I mean, that would have been cool actually. In the comic preview, I did see that it was out, but I purposely did not read it. And the reason is because I've waited so long, I would rather just wait until
January and just get it.
just let me start reading the first novel.
Gotcha.
But I'm wondering how they're going to do this though, because I remember at first it was going to be they were going to release a novel like in June, and then they were going to do another one like October or something like that. So I wonder if the whole timeline just shifted. So will we get one in January? Will we get the second one in March? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like I said, with them pushing all the timelines around due to COVID and whatnot, and I'm still wondering, like, okay, what is it about COVID that had an effect on books and comics?
I think it's mostly because of the marketing thing. So they can't go out and do a bunch of different live promotional events. They might have, because remember, weren't we supposed to get another Star Wars Celebration in 2021? And now it's been pushed to 2022. I think they were always going to skip 2020, even if COVID hadn't hit.
Yeah, but...
Or maybe not. Maybe they were going to do 2020. But either way, I think that the High Republic might have been like one of the big reveals. And then, of course, there's all kinds of things that they can't do. I mean, sure, you're tempted to just say, well, look, most of us are downloading these stupid books these days or doing the Audible thing.
You're right.
I mean, just release it. Actually, COVID would be even more of a reason to release it.
Exactly, because you're trying to stay away.
We're bored. We
right.
want stuff to do.
Exactly.
And
this content is like, okay, well, especially while waiting for the Mandalorian, we could have, watched this. I mean, read these books by now, and then,
Sure. I mean, I'm gonna start that Thrawn book pretty soon. So I mean, it's because I know that's the first of, I think it's another trilogy actually, but it deals with, I think it's a prequel, from what I understand. But I mean, there's a lot of things. I just read the latest Darth Vader, and the latest Star Wars is coming out. I think this coming Thursday. And that's a really good series. So, I mean, there's a lot of comics and everything that are around, and there's some books that are coming out that are still pretty compelling. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to save the High Republic for when they can make a big marketing blitz. Like just release it and really start. Because I have a feeling that once they start this machine rolling, they're not going to want it to stop.
Oh yeah, I can understand that.
You know, I think it's gonna be a momentum, and they're gonna ride it like a wave. But the question becomes, what are they gonna do besides these 4 books, and when?
Well, see, and I was just kind of going back to the article here.
I see that. I see you staring at your screen like I'm like, oh, he's reading something.
Well, this says Soul will be writing Light of the Jedi, an adult novel that will arguably serve as the centerpiece of the collection of titles coming from several different writers for a variety of different age demographics. So they're writing for different age groups in this.
That is probably one of the smartest things. This is what I said that they should
That's
do
what
in
I said.
the movies.
Yeah, well, that's why I said the word plan was used.
Well,
And then while the initiative has been pushed back to early 2021 due to the events of the global pandemic, that hasn't stopped new bits of information from being revealed as fans get closer and closer to the release day. But see, my thing is this, and I think this will be because they've kind of segregated things based upon demographics. I think what will be cool is that you can tell no different than how they were kind of starting to do a little bit on Disney. I could see them taking the High Republic and they can take certain things like, all right, we're going to create different shows like a Rebels, like a Resistance, and doing some things in animation. Some other things may be live action or movies. And so, but it's all kind of focused in the same area.
That's basically what I thought that they should do. I'm actually surprised that Filoni's next animated series is not a High Republic series.
Oh, and that he's doing like the whole Bad Batch thing?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. The Bad Batch is kind of cool. I don't know if I need a whole series on them, though.
Yeah, I mean, I get they were cool, but I mean...
They were good for a story arc. I don't necessarily know if I want to see an entire series, especially something that goes like multiple seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And where were they putting them? Wasn't it during the original trilogy? Or was it in between
no,
3 and 4 or something? I know it was after...
Oh, you're talking about
the timeline.
The timeline.
Yeah.
For this, I think it's going.
I thought it was the original trilogy.
It may be.
Or was it after the actual,
because
like around Mandalorian times or something?
Well, no, because see, the thing is that with the Bad Batch, I mean, I could see possibly being in the original trilogy era.
That would actually be different for me because I could see that because it would be kind of cool to see what would happen to these rogue clones during the era of the Empire when the Empire is the strongest.
Yeah, especially when at this point now you've got Vader walking around.
Yeah,
exactly.
Ronaldo
says maybe High Republic was going to finish publishing only project. Hold on, I'm sorry.
Yeah, start that again.
The cursor got in the way.
I guess my whole English language thing rubbed off on you.
Maybe High Republic was going to be a publishing-only project, but they thought if they could also make this work as a trilogy, and that's why they pushed the date to adjust for some things. That's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it actually was originally supposed to be like as he puts it, a publishing only, which means like a books or comics or things like that. And that could very well be.
Because initially, like I said, when they first started this whole thing, it started off with just a group of the authors. So you had like your Claudia Gray, Charles Soule, and like, others who were actually just writing the stories.
Yeah, but do you remember if it started, like, did Lucasfilm commission this or did the authors just come up and go, hey, we got this really cool idea?
That I don't think they ever really disclosed.
I don't think so either. I don't think that was ever released because if you remember, they just dropped this on us. They basically just came up to us. Well, not us personally, like, right. Hey guys, we just wanted to let you know.
It was just spitballing some ideas here.
we just wanted to, have you guys be the first. But no, I mean, they basically, I just remember reading, the articles as I do. You're looking up news on Google or various platforms or whatever, and then all of a sudden I started seeing all this stuff about the High Republic, and I'm like,
the heck is that?
Do they mean the Old Republic? Like, actually,
yeah, that's what I thought it was.
I thought
too.
Disney was gonna do something really stupid and change the name.
Oh, yeah.
But then they started talking about no, it's a new era in Star Wars and all this stuff, and then I started going, well, wait a minute, because at first, honestly, I wasn't really all that happy about it. I was a little bit irritated, to be honest.
Yeah, I remember, but. And a lot of people are kind of still upset about the fact that we're not getting an Old Republic thing as of yet. So my question to you is, do you think that they stayed away from doing an Old Republic thing, even though they already have the perfect story? I mean, because the game itself was a perfect, great Star Wars story. However, if you try to interpret that into a film and or series, it might screw it up for the fans, and fans are really, really in love with that. So it's like maybe it's better not to touch that at all, but give them something that's similar to that, or something that's kind of like it's a complete different landscape that's kind of set back in the past, where so you can still have that playground, but at the same time you're not screwing up something that's so beloved like the Old Republic era.
Yeah,
And that's how you get the High Republic, because it's well, now
totally.
you know nothing about this, and we don't either. So great, we can create it.
No, you have a point, because the Old Republic is revered now, and it's kind of like, hey, now that we're done completely massacring the Skywalker saga, let's go and screw up this other era, right?
Exactly.
And I mean, that could there could be a lot of truth to that, and I would go along with that, except for the fact that they went out of their way to canonize the Old Republic in The Rise of Skywalker by having the Revan statue. And, you know, they've made mention of Old Republic characters even in some of the novels, too. So it seems like they're trying to prepare us for something. See, there was no reason for them to do that in The Rise of Skywalker.
Well, I think that was just kind of one of those things where you acknowledge...
Fan service?
Yeah, fan service, but I think it's fan service in a way where... you wouldn't screw anything up. Like, I feel like that's just like, okay, so you have this whole world that's like pretty much comprised of the Sith. You know, why wouldn't you have that? It's no different than the Jedi Temple when they have their Jedi shrines and stuff like that of, you know, fallen Jedi.
No, I get it, but I mean, there's so many Sith they could choose from that they wouldn't have to worry about it. The fact that they canonize that particular character.
Well, that's because he's the most recognized.
But I also think that means they have some plans for the Old Republic, and they want to establish that now. So we have a couple of people in the chat, Boatwright Family and Comics. There's a lot of meat on the bone with Old or High Republic content. Disney sees dollar signs.
Definitely.
I mean, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I don't think that could be ignored either, is that this is a business.
Oh, yeah.
And they have to try to do things within a business model. But I agree with you, though, in the sense of the High Republic being that it's brand new and there's nothing tied to it. You know, nobody's married to any idea or anything. This is like a fertile playground now that they can create characters, and they're free, and they're not tied down by the weight of history.
True.
To where they have to do things.
The other thing, too, about, you know, this, and just thinking briefly, was that with the High Republic, you know, they kept talking about the various demographics. So in the Old Republic, you might not be able to do that as easily, but in the High Republic, you can.
Yeah.
So now you're stretching, like, you know, the Boatwright Family in comics has said, like, you know, it's about the dollar signs. Okay, I would rather I can get little kids, I can get, you know, the young adults, and I can get the grown folks, and like, everybody,
you know, create a new era,
a whole new era. And now it's money streams coming from everywhere.
Yours.
Yep.
Because if you think about it, the Skywalker saga and the Old Republic are still part of Lucas. They're basically George Lucas. Well, kinda. I know that they were licensed. I'm not sure. I know the Old Republic concept was George Lucas. I'm not sure how much he had to do with the Knights of the Old Republic game beyond just approving and, yes, you can do this, no, you can't do that kind of thing, like what he used to do with the novels.
Right.
All right, so Jason.
Yeah, he says, Star Wars, I think, aren't touching the Old Republic because they don't know what to do with the Old Republic yet. They probably don't want to copy the legends, but they want to please the fans.
Yeah, well, and that's essentially what I was alluding to as well, is the fact that you had the Knights of the Old Republic game that tells a very definitive story. Every bit as definitive as what we got in the prequel and original trilogy for the Skywalker saga. So that said, it's kind of like you either have to tell it pretty much verbatim, or you have to kind of, you know, maybe like do what they've been doing with some of the other legend stuff. You have to take some of it and then spin it and create your own storyline with it, which could risk losing fans.
Yeah, it's no different than how you felt. You know, you and I talk about the Meg movie. You know,
Yes.
how
Oh,
the
my
book,
goodness.
you know, it's like, okay, yeah.
You went there.
Well, I think that's just a perfect parallel to
Oh,
it.
it's too perfect of a parallel.
So, yeah, I think that's probably the case. Let me see. Ronaldo says, I think The Old Republic was a movie or a series that the Game of Thrones guys were going to work on, but their project was put on the shelf when they left. Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, when you bring those two guys and, Benioff and Weiss is like, all right, yeah.
Well, his second half is good, too. Or it was just replaced for the High Republic. That's a possibility that I had considered at the time.
Yeah, that is true.
That maybe it was kind of like, okay, they were going to do it, and now it's like, it goes back to what Jason said. Now they don't really know what to do with the Old Republic because maybe Benioff and Weiss actually pitched them something really cool. Well, they can't do that now because they don't own the property or that story. So rather than get somebody else to try to revamp it, maybe they just created this new era instead so they can move forward. Because either way, it's obvious that they're trying to tell stories from the past.
Right.
Because they got the Mandalorian to tell the stories in between the original and the sequel trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's covered for a while. Even though, again, I think, look, you got like 30 years of time between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. There's a lot of stories you can tell. A lot of really interesting ones, too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even within the first 5 years, I'll go even one better. Between Return of the Jedi and The Mandalorian, there's 5 years.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff you could tell about, the Empire still trying to hold on to its power through the remnants.
Yeah.
You have all these Grand Moffs and Grand Admirals and stuff trying to fight for control. And
yeah, I mean, I could see you could do a lot of different things on the political side, like
completely.
with the New Republic trying to, establish things over the old Empire, the old Empire people trying to still hold on. And then just to hear what they're, like, okay, well, the Emperor's gone, Vader's gone, like, what do we do? Like, well, I'm going to do it. And then now you have this whole
Well, that's it.
power
You don't
struggle.
have any, exactly, because you don't have anybody like a Palpatine or Vader
to reel everybody
that can
in.
enforce their will. I mean, it's kind of like you have a Grand Moff going up against a Grand Admiral, and it's like, well, why should I listen to you? Well, why should I listen to you? It's kind of like, well, who are you? I mean,
Well, I'll rank.
I mean, exactly. And it's like based on...
It's like A Few Good Men. She outranks you, Danny.
It's kind of like one of those things that it just shows you how fragile the Empire really is, because the sign of good leadership is that if the leader dies or something happens,
The regime can still move on.
as if nothing happened.
All right. But that was the thing. But that just shows you, like, the power of Palpatine. But that's the one thing he craved was power. And so it was like, okay, well, once his power was gone, there went everything else.
Well, he did say, they alluded to this in the Aftermath trilogy.
Oh, yeah, that, like, if they deserve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if he ended up dying, they don't deserve to go on.
Exactly.
But yet he did have a contingency plan. See, and this is another way the Rise of Skywalker, by bringing Palpatine back, kind of contradicts itself. Even its own new canon. That's what kills me.
Well, and that's what they say. Even the Mandalorian is actually supposed to answer even a lot of questions that.
Well, they better have longer than 20-minute episodes then, because it's got a lot.
or
First,
way
they got to
more
introduce
seasons.
all these new characters. Yeah, or it better go like 20. Like it better be like The Simpsons at this point. But I mean, it's one of those things though that. So we're supposed to believe that Palpatine had this whole plan. Okay, now this is the final order. This is all part of the plan the whole time. Since I've falling down the shaft, I whipped out a little notepad because it's a long way down, scribbled out some stuff, and then my spirit zips into wherever.
Hey, Siri.
Maybe a Jawa or something. Who knows? But the thing is, in the Aftermath trilogy, it talks about, and keep in mind, this is new canon. This isn't like some, Legends book. It talks about that, yeah, I mean, the whole big battle at Jakku and all that stuff, it was engineered that there was this big bomb or whatever, which is basically going to take out the Empire. It was like a beacon or something that was actually going to draw the Empire to it, like the entire armada, the whole fleet, and then boom, wipe them all out, because Palpatine was like, if you all let me die, then that means you don't deserve to go on. So it's kind of like a...
And I could get it because it's like you guys about to get, your shine off of me. I created this.
Yeah, well,
and all this year, I can understand that. Like the years that he's
Sure.
put into having to kiss up in front of the Jedi and having to, act like he's in danger and strategically planning everything that you see in the Clone Wars, it's like, okay, I'm not about to just let anybody just take what I have. And, it's like, oh, well, we found the Emperor's plans for another Death Star. I'll build it. Mm-mm.
Well, and that's it. I mean, it's one of those things that I honestly believe that you have to, and this is the problem and the weakness that I see with what they did, and the more and more that the time goes on, I should say, the more I see it as a weakness. Whereas when Colin Trevorrow was originally in charge and he was doing his whole Duel of the Fates thing, he wasn't bringing Palpatine back.
Right.
Because that whole aftermath explanation, I think, was far better. Now, don't get me wrong. I totally geeked out seeing him on the screen again, and it was cool. And I was sort of glad that Palpatine kind of had like a
backup plan,
like a second run.
Yeah.
But still, it's kind of like, do you really have to keep relying on the classic villains in order to keep things going? Why can't you create somebody as cool?
Mm-hmm.
I was even kind of cool with Snoke, to be honest.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess if you kind of just had a better story for him, that I would go with that. But I
liked
think
him as a character. I mean, it was The Force Awakens. It was kind of weird, but The Last Jedi. I actually thought that he was kind of cool in The Last Jedi.
Oh yeah, you saw how powerful he was. Yeah, but
he was really powerful. He kind of had that presence about him.
Yeah.
I mean, you knew Palpatine could tie him up in a pretzel, like, a million times, but at the same time, that was Palpatine, though. Snoke, on the other hand, was going to be a lot more powerful than anybody else that they had.
Yeah, he looked like a tall Freddy Krueger who had the Force.
Yeah, pretty much. And then, of course, everybody had to try to guess. Like, it was inconceivable to people that Snoke could just be Snoke, right?
Mm-hmm.
He had to be like Mace Windu after. I mean, It was just kind of like, guys, come on now.
Yeah, exactly. Jason says, I hated Palpatine's return. Ronaldo said, I really wanted to see Kylo Ren as the main villain.
Yeah, well, both of those, I could see that. See, here's what I was hoping. I really liked Kylo's turn, I guess, in The Last Jedi, when he decided, you know what, I'm done being the apprentice, I'm done being the lackey, now I'm going to be the master. And I thought that was a pretty cool move because he was sort of like masking his feelings and making Snoke think that he was turning it, the lightsaber and all that towards Rey, but really, I mean, he was seeing the right thing, just the wrong person.
Right.
And I think that if Kylo had been the ultimate bad guy, this unhinged, unglued, completely reckless and out of control guy, I thought that would have been a nice contrast to what we had seen before.
I agree. Jason says he disagreed with Ronaldo.
Yeah, he's agreeing with Ronaldo. And it's one of those things that I think that Kylo's story in the sequel trilogy really was interesting. And they really could have brought that a little bit further. And this is one of the things that I really enjoyed about the Colin Trevorrow script. Now, again, I will be the first person to admit that the script and the story or the treatment or whatever actually looks pretty good, but they could have put it on film and executed it poorly, and then we would have been wishing, oh, I wonder what it would have been like if JJ had been in charge, I mean,
right.
Grass is always greener on the other side. But that said, I liked what he did with Hux versus Kylo in his script for Duel of the Fates.
Yeah.
I thought that was very unique. I thought it was interesting. I just thought it was a really cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, I just really think that with Star Wars in and of itself, I think the fans just really wanted something. Honestly, when we look at the sequel trilogy as a whole, I think they just wanted something fresh and new. And there's glimpses of it, like I said, with Kylo. But then there's like it overall. It just it failed, much like the Empire. And I think with High Republic, I think this is kind of where fans probably would have wanted to see, the originality again. And it's hard because like what we've always often talked about is that Star Wars started in the mind of George Lucas. It started in the mind of one man, and he's been the spearhead, or the tip of the spear for the creation of the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy. So it's like, even though he may not have directed everything, he still controlled the story, and you had to accept it because this is from the guy who gave it to you the very first time. So you have to live with that. But then now you're putting this in the hands of people who really enjoy Star Wars. And it's kind of like we always make the analogy of great basketball players don't always make great coaches.
Right.
And so you're putting this in the hands of people who were huge fans, like J.J. Abrams, huge fan of Star Wars. And, of course, we all, even myself, he wasn't really a huge Star Trek fan. But we saw what he did with that franchise, and we were just like, if he can do this with something that he really wasn't that big of a fan of,
yep,
and he's a huge fan of Star Wars, like, it's over. It's like Star Wars is about to go catapult into the next galaxy.
I thought he did a really good job with The Force Awakens as far as bringing us back to even though I know a lot of people criticize, but what he was doing was really more like a rhyming. I mean, it was a classic storytelling technique.
Yeah,
you
it's
take
a callback.
The same, it's a callback. You take the same form. You're telling a different story, but you're using the same beats. You're using the same form. I didn't have a problem with that.
Right. But then from that, and that was just to suck us back in. He introduces the new characters. But then I think that's where, and that's why we always said, that second movie has to hit hard, because if it doesn't, because that's how Empire was. One, Empire was is quintessentially the greatest Star Wars movie of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, you have to then now take the story to a level where people can't imagine. And that's very difficult to do. And because he dropped the ball on that, now you're forced to either go with someone new like Colin Trevorrow, and it's like, do we risk more damage, or do we go with the safe bet and go with JJ and hope he can just, because he did a great job with the Force Awakens, can he just bring this home? But I think if they, like we said this from the beginning, if they plan this from day one, like, okay, here are our characters, here's where they start, here's how it ends. Does it make sense? Is it cohesive? Is it fresh? Is it like, let's check these things off. Not so much do we have X amount of lightsaber duels. I mean, you got to have those, of course, but like we learned from the galley.
Yeah, not do a checklist, basically.
Yeah.
I'm going to get lightsaber duels, check. Sith Lord, check. That kind of
exactly.
Thing.
But, it's kind of like, when you have, and that's why honestly, if the sequel trilogy had been done by Filoni, I think we would have been fine.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, oh, man.
At least if he was the executive producer.
Even going back to some of the earlier stuff that you were saying about Luke, I mean, I've got so much that I need to just
get off your chest.
Yes, because
have at it, my friend.
there's just so much. But let's just start with the most recent thing that you're talking about first. The problem, I don't think so much, even though, don't get me wrong, there are issues. Like The Last Jedi definitely has issues. Even though, again, I will say for the record that we both enjoyed the film.
True.
Of course, we didn't really know that at first when we were in the car silent for like 20 minutes and each one of us afraid to tell the other one, like, so did you like it? That kind of thing. But again, I think the biggest problem, and there have been a lot of Star Wars shows that pointed this out at the time when Colin Trevorrow was actually replaced by JJ. Like the very first news broke, is that JJ is known for being able to start things, but he's terrible at finishing them. And they actually said that about Lost.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Lost.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not that great at finishing things, and I think that that's the main problem. I don't actually think that where The Last Jedi put us was a problem. Because if you look at Colin Trevorrow's script, The Last Jedi actually sets that movie up perfectly. And it takes it into some different things, different areas, different interesting things, right? But when you look at it as a whole, I think it's really more of JJ's weaknesses at finishing things, like being the guy to finish the trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think he knocked it out of the park with The Force Awakens.
Definitely.
And I mean, I thought it was a good, fun movie, but it wasn't ideal by any stretch of the imagination. And I can understand why a lot of people really didn't like Rise of Skywalker. There was some lazy writing when it comes to that. There was overuse of fan service. But even going back, oh man, it's like I gotta try to remember all this stuff. Oh wait, Ronaldo's got something.
Yeah.
I think Colin Trevorrow at least tried to connect all three sequels, and exactly. If you really look at the Colin Trevorrow script again for Duel of the Fates, not only was it a perfect follow-up to The Last Jedi, but it really did do a nice job of tying all the three trilogies together.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think what JJ was doing was he was trying to capture the spirit of it. And this goes back to another point that I wanted to make, and that is Star Wars is a really weird, unique animal. So on one hand, the fans all say, well, we want something fresh. We want something new.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is it has to be a very laser-focused, narrow thing because, you know, let's face it. I mean, Rian Johnson gave us something new. A lot of people didn't really respond too well to it. Now, you could argue that maybe that's because it was poorly executed and there were some things that he did in there, but the bottom line is that Star Wars fans are really, really picky. And it's kind of like what you said. It came from the mind of George Lucas, but even George Lucas was crucified for the prequels.
Yeah, I think... But
so
see,
it's kind of like, it's almost like, what's the perfect recipe then?
I would say for the sequel trilogy, in my mind as a fan, I would say the perfect recipe would be this. You have to give us interesting characters who have the capacity to grow in whether they're going good, bad, that's inconsequential right now. But they just have to have that capacity. It has to be like, okay, of course, the story has to drive everything. What's the ultimate goal of this? And and in that story, is it something that's believable in the Star Wars world?
Yeah.
So it has to be familiar enough, at the same time creative, because that's the thing that made Star Wars initially so attractive, was because you can't necessarily say it was familiar, but it's like it's taking place in space. We've seen other space movies, so those things were familiar, but it was something new. Like you take something like Star Trek, it's like, okay, Star Trek was very familiar, that was back in the 60s. Okay, so you had something like Star Trek. We've been out exploring space, and that was its own unique original. A man named Gene Roddenberry had a vision, and he created Star Trek. And that whole world was kind of like its own thing. But anytime you had sequels or TV shows out of it, you didn't have to have Kirk and Spock, but you had like The Next Generation was a great show. It had all the beats of the original trilogy. The original series. It had humor. You had, instead of Spock, you had Data, and you had a different type of captain. Picard was not like Kirk, but he still had that gravitas. It was just in a different way. You had all the familiar things while in the framework of Star Trek, and I think that's what we as Star Wars fans wanted for the sequel trilogy, and it started to go that way because you could kind of see that with Kylo. I mean, if he was definitely a dark side guy, but he didn't have that Vader polish, so to speak. Mm-hmm. He was rough and unhinged, and that was different. It was like, okay, well, this guy's almost like anger management problems. So he's kind of like how Anakin was when he first hit the lava. I hate you. But that's cool, though. You have someone like a Poe Dameron who's kind of like smug. He knows he's good, kind of witty, kind of like Han Solo was. Okay, I can believe that. Rey is kind of the, looking up at the stars, Luke Skywalker. Familiar. Okay, cool. And then you kind of, have different original parts of the story. Now, when you get to The Last Jedi, it's like, okay, you could do something where, okay, Luke is disillusioned. I like that aspect. But don't have him that for like 90% of the movie.
Well, not only that, don't have him disillusioned to the point. I mean, I love the disillusion part because I thought that was actually more realistic than him still being this heroic guy, even though I could see where it could go that way too, though. But the disillusionment made more sense.
Yeah, the disillusionment makes more sense because it's like, okay, he had never had that failure. Like, and see, he finally experienced what Obi-Wan and Yoda were afraid of for him. That's what made it cool.
Yeah.
Was because although they were like, thank God, and the thing is like,
right. Obi-Wan's like, oh, I can't do it twice now.
Exactly. But like, and you understand like the complexities of why Obi-Wan did what he did, because he was afraid of like, okay, I can't lose him like I lost Anakin.
See, but don't you think, though, that if you're Yoda, maybe you don't get the guy that lost the dad to train the son? Like, maybe you figure, hey, I wonder if there's anybody else that survived Order 66. And
Well, I mean, at the time, they were, but see, they were the only ones who were left at the time. Yeah, think about it, like.
But he had a, I'm just surprised that Yoda didn't go like, maybe I'll do this one myself.
Well, that's what I've always said. Like, but then I remember I asked that question.
Dooku, though.
Remember I asked that question. I said, well, why didn't Yoda take Luke? And you were just like, well, because, he's too powerful in the Force. The moment he starts training Luke, the Emperor will sense it.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes they make a lot of sense.
So I think that.
It's the first time I ever lost an argument with myself. It's great.
So I think that's one of the things that, when you look at The Last Jedi, that's what I'm saying. I think that's where things went left, is because I agree that, Luke could have been disillusioned. It makes sense. You lost, not only did you lose a pupil to the dark side, but you lost your nephew. I mean, that's like I said, he felt the same, and he's always tried to mimic himself after Obi-Wan. Well, guess what? Welcome to Obi-Wan's world. Because he lost a brother.
Dude, it would have been fantastic if it had been Obi-Wan in The Last Jedi instead of Yoda.
Hurts, doesn't it? Like, if he'd have said that, I would have died laughing. But
it's like, well, it all depends on your point of view. It'd be like Luke would just be like, look, I don't want to hear that right now. So Ronaldo. But they need to be careful to not contradict things we saw in the original trilogy, prequels or sequels.
I concur. Yes, that's a very valid point, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you have to be mindful.
Yeah, well, Boatwright Family of Comics agrees with them.
Yeah,
you do, because, and this is the problem that they have, and this is what I said, and I know I've said this on other shows before, where one of the problems that Star Wars has is the more stories that it starts to tell, and the longer it's been around and everything, you run the risk of painting yourself into a corner.
That, and if you are too close to certain timelines.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's actually what started to happen with Legends.
Mm-hmm.
And they started to sort of paint themselves into a corner, and then they couldn't tell any more stories or they had to try to undo things, or, kind of like do soft reboots and stuff, or go back. Like, for instance, after the Yuuzhan Vong thing, a lot of main characters were wiped out and everything. So now, and then you had Jason Solo essentially became Darth somebody. They had a contest that you can name him, and whoever did, it was actually kind of a cool name. If you guys know the name that Jason Solo became, go ahead and throw it in the chat, or if you're watching the rebroadcast, throw it in the comments.
Yeah, I'm sure Jason, if he wasn't eating right now,
Jason wasn't eating right now, he'd be all over this, and he'll probably put it in the comments section actually. Right. And, hey, if you guys, if you are watching the rebroadcast or whether you're chatting live, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And hit us up at Head to Head SW on Facebook,
Instagram.
Twitter, and Instagram, yeah. Thought I would just mention that. But, yeah, they basically have to be very careful when they're doing this because, like I said, after the Yuuzhan Vong trilogy, and then Jason Solo became a Sith Lord. And, it was kind of like, okay, if they wanted to tell some of the more classic stories, they actually had to go back in time before that. And that was like a 21 or 22 book series. So they had to start going, oh, yeah, this book now takes place before then. Well, that timeline starts to get more narrow and more narrow. And this is why I say they got to be really careful about this whole just cornucopia of stories that they've been telling between 3 and 4.
Definitely.
Because it's kind of like you're getting a tighter and tighter timeline.
Darth Cadus?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's it.
Nice one, Ronaldo.
Thank you. See? All you got to do is just ask. It was, actually. And he even spelled it correctly, too. Because that was another thing. It was interesting because I remember there was all kinds of fan submissions, and that was a cool one. And that was actually a really cool storyline. And it's sort of, Jason Solo basically parallels Kylo Ren very closely because Jason was one of, basically in Legends, Han and Leia had 3 kids.
Mm-hmm.
They had Jason, Jaina, and then Anakin. And then Mara Jade and Luke Skywalker had Ben. So, and it's kind of like Rey is sort of like Jaina in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like just the way that, the character's written and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's one of those storylines, I think, that they've mirrored the Legends thing okay, but they put their own spin on it.
Yeah, they kind of cherry picked from
Yeah, and they cherry pick, and they continue to do that. And that's okay, but again, you have to be very careful because you will paint yourself into a corner and you will trap yourself. And that's why I think that the High Republic is a good idea because now they could tell new stories in a timeline that's never really been touched.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I think that they could really do a lot between, well, let's just say The Mandalorian and The Force Awakens.
Right.
But they can even do a lot in The Mandalorian, and look at what they've done. They've been able to tell some stories, and it hasn't really contradicted anything.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I mean, I just think that that's one of the things, and I have a lot of, this is going to sound terrible, but high hopes for the High Republic. Only because I really think that, first of all, they got some just top-notch authors writing these stories.
Definitely.
Secondly, as you pointed out earlier in the show, they actually had a plan. Mm-hmm. They all sat in a room and they came up with stuff.
Right. And I think that's what's the most important.
Yeah, that's definitely the most important. So, but what do you guys think? Whether you're chatting with us live, whether you're watching the rebroadcast, let us know either in the chat section or in the comment section what you guys think. What are you hoping to see in the High Republic? That's what we really want to know. They already said we're going to get a ton of stories or whatever, but what do you guys hope to see? You can let us know, and we'll definitely, hang on, before we move on, let's get Ronaldo here. Also, another good idea could be adapting Star Wars Legacy comics. Yeah, I keep forgetting about what would actually be the Legends comics.
Mm.
Hey, Jason's back.
Yeah.
Yeah, you missed the big trivia question, man. Ronaldo got it, though. Just check back up in the chats. You'll see. All right. Ready to do a little bit of battle?
Yeah, man. Let's go for it.
All right. What do we got?
Next, we have Duel of the Fates. All right, man. So this week, we're going, because of COVID, everybody's been kind of cooped up. So I figure we can go traveling a little bit in our minds. So, which place would you rather live, Coruscant or Naboo?
Normally this would be pretty easy. I would just say Coruscant because there's like a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
And you can choose, especially once we found out that there's so many levels.
Yeah.
It's almost
the
like
whole planet is a city.
The whole planet's a city. So, I mean, you just got to figure that, like, somewhere on that planet would kind of be your ideal thing.
Place to hang out.
Yeah, like your ideal trip. Whether you're more of a suburban guy, whether you're more of a downtown type person,
mm-hmm.
whether you're a little bit more underbelly and a little seedy,
yep.
Whether you're a little bit more upscale and, maybe like the Hamptons or something. Oh, wait a minute. Jason is saying Naboo. All right, why are you saying Naboo?
Yeah, he says for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's. Well, what about you though?
This was a hard one for me too. I mean, like that. I think that's kind of one of the reasons why I picked it, because there's a part of me that loves the city. Like I love, you know, just the atmosphere of being where everything is, and but Naboo, when you look at it, it's so peaceful and tranquil. Like,
Yeah.
and like when you look at like the waterfalls and stuff that they have, I mean, it's perfectly like relaxing. So it's almost like you want a vacation there. Like I'm going to Naboo for vacation, but at the same time, I like to kind of somewhat be around me. Like there's things that are happening, and uh, it also seems like if you need something, you can find it on Coruscant. Whereas at Naboo, it's like you gotta get that imported or something like that. It's almost kind of like living in Hawaii. Like Hawaii is beautiful and tranquil, and like it's perfect, relaxing, and it's probably got great weather like most of the time. You may run across a Gungan here or there, but you can bypass them. But there's like, okay,
So, for the record, you don't want to live in the Gungan city.
definitely
When
not.
we're talking Naboo, we
Yeah,
mean
we're talking above the water,
Yes.
above sea level, shall we say? So, um,
Naboo looks like Teletubby land.
well, yeah, some parts of it, but then like when you go like to Theed, and it's like it kind of looks like you're in this weird like King Arthurish or Game of Thrones kind of vibe, because it's all like regal and you have all these high
what about that
arches
one
and-
guy? Oh man, the one guy in the Phantom Menace, the one that kept like whining, the white, sort of longer hair white dude. He totally looks like he's out of a King Arthur movie.
Oh yeah, it looks like almost like a weird version of Gandalf or something. But yeah,
All right, let's see what we got in the chats though. So Jason has a lot to say here.
yeah.
Coruscant sounds awful.
It's too crowded and busy.
Busy. And then
the boat ride, family and comics. Naboo for me, I'm not much for city life.
And then Jason comes back with, if you could choose any planet, where would you choose? He would choose Alderaan.
I would until it got blown up.
Yeah, it's like, well,
Didn't want to be there when that happened.
you're going to have a little bit of a shelf life if you actually live on Alderaan. But
Yeah, it's like pre-Death Star, yes. But
yeah, exactly.
the housing
Hoth,
market.
I think, for me. No, I'm just
Oh
kidding.
God, I mean Michigan in like a couple of months.
Yeah, pretty much. Mustafar, without question. No, I don't. Actually, that's a good question, though. I mean,
honestly, if I had to final answer, I'm gonna go with Naboo.
I'm going to go with Harloff Minor.
Oh,
I mean, Naboo. So, okay, before we go back to the chats again, Naboo is actually good, and I agree with you. But see, part of the problem I have, and I guess there's enough of a city in Naboo that it's okay. But here's the thing: it's almost like here on Earth, right?
Mhm.
You're driving down the freeway, and you'll see, like, there'll be this one house, and there's just like nothing for 20 miles.
right. You're
And
like,
that sounds good until like you need a hospital or something, and it's like, dude, those guys are gonna die because there's no way an ambulance is getting to them in like 5 minutes, or they're gonna get to the ER or whatever.
or just if you're hungry, you can just like, man, I gotta go 20 miles just
Yeah.
before I find.
Or
White
some
Castle or something.
family decides to basically off you. It's like nobody's even gonna. Nobody would know.
Yeah.
Your body's just gonna sit there and rotting for weeks probably before anybody finds you.
Just toss you in the field in the back somewhere.
Right. See, this is the kind of crap that could probably happen to you on Naboo if you're out there living in, whatever. But now you could make the same argument for Tatooine too.
Well, yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to live on Tatooine.
No,
But I mean, I think I was.
that's a good question though. Like if you, besides these two, I don't know. I'm gonna say, because you have to think in terms of Coruscant. Now, if you're talking about the Coruscant that we've seen,
You know what? I'm changing my answer. I'm sticking with Coruscant.
I'm going to say that only because the whole planet is basically a city. There are different like vibes to it.
Yeah, definitely.
And if it's the right vibe, I can hang with it. If I'm choosing like any planet though in the Star Wars universe, oh man, I'd have to think about that.
At least the ones that we've seen. So you got
Yeah, you can't. I mean, you could go into the ones from the novels and stuff like that, but if you're talking like the ones that we've seen in the movies,
yeah, I'll even so the ones we've seen in the movies. Mustafar, Geonosis,
Well,
Camino.
there's like 20 of them in the first 5 minutes
There's a
of Rogue One.
I know, right? Jeddah and
Or what's that one? What was the first one that they were on? The one where Galen Erso was on. Where Krennic first.
when they had the black sand.
Yeah.
Oh,
I keep forgetting it.
But not that one. Wouldn't be that one for me.
Actually, you know what? Scarif.
Scarif looks
Kind of looked like a Hawaii type of vibe.
Yeah, it kind of had. Yeah, it kind of did. It's funny. Jason just said it too. What about Scarif? Yeah, Scarif would be cool. It's kind of had like a Vietnamish vibe to it, though.
Well, that's true. It looked kind of like a Cambodia kind of thing going. But I mean, going back up, Ronaldo basically says, Coruscant for me, I would go to see the Jedi Temple as a tourist. They won't let me in, but it would be fun. Well, you could try breaking in. I mean, if you were successful, you'd probably be brought into the temple. Then Jason's like, Coruscant probably has to import a lot of stuff. There are a ton of people, but they don't have enough land for food. That's a good point, but you have to remember they probably have like hydroponics gardens and, probably like greenhouses. I mean, I'm sure they're bringing stuff in.
It's a capital city, too.
Yeah,
so
it is. It's like the capital of the Republic at that point. Yeah. So, and then, of course, Ronaldo says, and also Naboo has sand, coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. There is some.
Actually, you know what? I would probably, oh, crap, what is the name of it?
You think of that. Ronaldo's also, if I'm lucky, I would talk to the Death Sticks guy to see how he changed his life.
You know where I would probably go? Cyrano.
Which one was that?
Where Dooku's from.
Oh, yes.
That's kind of like an even, feels like it's an even, balance.
Well, it's funny because if you think about it with a lot of these planets, what they've done is they've taken like one of Earth's climates or ecosystems or whatever and just made a whole planet based on it.
Right.
You know,
Endor is basically like, the Everglades.
Yep. Endor is basically like a forest. Then you have Dagobah, which is nothing but a giant swamp. Mustafar is like essentially a volcano planet, right? And then you have Camino, which is essentially Waterworld.
Seattle.
So I mean, there's like, it's all these extremes, but like Scarif.
Coruscant's New York.
Yes. Or Vegas.
Yeah.
Then you have Tatooine, you have, Hoth. I mean, it's kind of like they have all these different global planets or whatever. But I mean, there's some though that they visited in, say, the Clone Wars that were cool. I mean, I don't necessarily remember all the names of all these planets, but
right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question when you really stretch it out. Because you're right, actually. I mean, before Alderaan became a pile of rubble.
Yeah, Alderaan's beautiful.
I mean, that probably was the ideal spot.
Honestly, yeah.
To be honest. At least that, we've seen.
What's the climate of Cyrano? Usually a breezy 72 degrees, mostly. Light chance of partly cloudy.
Exactly, right. Now, it's pretty much, from what I remember, like, it's basically a normal...
Yeah, Cyrano is kind of like a...
I'm trying to think of what it would be like on Earth, though. Just from what they described. I mean, you really get a sense of the planet in Jedi Lost.
Almost like a Italy.
Yeah, right. So it's kind of like got a Mediterranean vibe.
Yeah.
So kind of like your Italy, France.
Let's go to... Like
on the Riviera or something.
Yep.
That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that would be cool. I would like that. But again, it's really difficult because when you really stop and think about this, and this question actually made me think a little bit when I first saw it. Again, try not to think too much because, trying to keep everything spontaneous. But when you really stop and think about the Star Wars planets, they're all so extreme.
Yeah, definitely.
That it's really difficult if you just sit there and go, okay, which planet would I want to live on? Oh, well, even though you don't really see the good parts of it, but Corellia. Corellia is like supposed to be okay, even though we kind of see a little bit more of the whole seedy underbelly kind of criminal element to it.
Right. I wouldn't want to go to Utapau.
No. God, I forgot about Utapau.
Kashyyyk, you got that.
Yeah, Kashyyyk is kind of like Endor,
Yep.
but a little bit more jungly.
Jungly.
Well, it is. It's more of a jungle, whereas Endor is more of a forest. I mean, it does make a difference. Ronaldo says the lakes in Naboo give me the creeps with all those giant monsters.
Well, yeah, but see, they're deep in the water, though. I don't think.
And that's the thing.
Yeah,
Jason says the monsters are in the deep core.
Yeah.
And that's it. But I mean, if you think about it,
as long as you're not in Gunga City, you're fine.
Sure. And if you start to go swimming even off of the Pacific or, certain things, you could get attacked by a great white or a tiger shark or something. So I mean, it's not like even in Earth's waters, you're not exactly 100% safe either.
Jason said Kashyyyk would be nice.
Yeah. I mean, I could see, because the tree cities of Kashyyyk are cool.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, if you actually go into the lower levels, oh, man, that's all kinds of danger. That's how Wookiees actually test their manhood or whatever. Is they go to the lower levels. Yeah, you don't want to go there.
Well, my whole thing is just like, all that growling and howling, like that would get on my nerves.
Well, that's the thing.
It's like most of them are inhabited by Wookiees, so it's like I don't want to hear that all day. Especially if I can't understand them.
That would be the problem. It's like how you even learn. Like, they never went into how Han Solo learned the Wookiee language.
Right.
It made sense to say that in Solo, a Star Wars story, because you had to figure, look, if this guy is, like, able to hang around this guy all the time, that he probably knows Shri Wook or whatever the language is. But, it's one of those things that, where did he learn it?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like Han Solo doesn't strike me as the guy that's studying languages and.
Yeah, I mean, unless he was something he just was able to pick up.
Well, you know what? He could have, because honestly, it is true that he does know a lot of history. He knows like a lot of different species of things. He's really street smart.
Yeah, he's well traveled.
Very well traveled. Ronaldo says Kashyyyk is really nice, but there are those giant spiders. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's all kinds of nasty stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the Amazon River. And just even that whole...
Yep.
There's, like, just so much, like, every Jurassic thing that's around is there. It's kind of like the fact that people swim or do anything in the Amazon.
It's beyond me.
Yeah, it just... It's crazy, and that's kind of how that lower level of Kashyyyk is, or some of the like deep African jungles and stuff where you have these bugs that are as big as your head, and it's just kind of like there's just certain places on Earth I don't think we need to be.
Yeah, it's just like when I see things pop up like some of the aliens on Star Trek. Yeah, I'm good.
Well, it's just like Dagobah, man. Can you imagine what's crawling around in that?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like
a whole planet full of it. I mean, who knows what? Like, I mean, Yoda. Why would you? I mean, I understood strategically why he went there, but he's by himself.
Well, I mean, we saw Baby Yoda, man. He ate like a whole little frog by himself.
Oh, that's true.
Like
yeah,
50.
Well, and you know what? We still don't know the whole Yoda species homeworld.
Right.
For all we know, maybe it's like Dagobah.
Maybe it is Dagobah. That would be hilarious. Like the whole time that's where he was.
That would be the funniest thing in the world, is if they end up
especially when he says like, my home this is. It's just like, of course it is.
Oh, man, that would be like the biggest.
That'd be like the biggest reveal next to Darth Vader, I am your father.
It would be. The whole time.
Yep.
It's like if you went to the other side of Dagobah, there's like villages full of these people.
Full of little yodelos.
Yodelings or something. What about live in Exegol with the Sith cultists?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, that doesn't even seem to be a very hospitable environment.
Yeah, the electrical currents flying around that place, and
yeah. See, Jason came to the same conclusion. Yep. Yoda species probably lives in swamps naturally. Yeah, I mean, it just
one of his concerts. Jason Ronaldo says you can hear Palpatine in one of his concerts in the stadium.
Oh well, there was what was that?
Palpatine and the Sith.
No, there was a little thing on YouTube. I actually shared it on our show once. If we were doing... I shared it before we were doing all this stuff like you know how now I actually played the trailer before?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I plan ahead, I could actually go ahead and share these things. But at the time, I wasn't really thinking about that. But there was this whole thing where he kept, what did he call him, Lance or something? It was like this whole little cartoon, like animated skit where Palpatine was like directing the Sith, and he was like, you're a little pitchy. You know, I got to find it again. It was like one of the funniest things in the world. Lance, again, it's... and he's like all like, it's supposed to be ha, 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 or something weird like that. I mean, it was... Actually, it was right up there with a lot of the Robot Chicken stuff.
Gotcha.
It was hilarious.
Gotcha.
So that, it almost makes me... Ronaldo, were you referencing that at all, or... You know what? Because that was just pretty funny. I don't know, though. All that's making me a little bit thirsty.
Yeah, man.
Although I've been drinking like no tomorrow over here. This, even though we don't actually have like a
sponsorship.
Yeah, any kind of a sponsorship. Although Spindrift is out there watching, and you know they want to throw a little bit of sponsorship our way, I'll do it. Yeah. He's right, Jason. That's it. It's how it should have ended. Yes, that was the one. And that was so funny to me, man. That was like one of the funniest skits in a while. Because how it should have ended stuff is actually...
Yeah, it's
like sometimes they're either hilarious or they fall a little bit flat. But most of the time they're pretty funny.
Definitely.
All right, you ready to go to the Cantina?
Let's go, man.
Let's do it, man. All right, so here we are. I am drinking my, what is this? Grapefruit. Grapefruit Spindrift. Spindrift, for those of you who don't know, I'm really fighting for this thing. It's like a carbonated sparkling water type of thing. But the cool thing is, unlike a lot of the other ones, it's, I don't know, it's just sweetened with fruit juice. A lot of people don't like it. Around work, they have a very unflattering name for it that I won't repeat here, but the initials are BFD. It's Bigfoot's...
All right.
Well, I just won't go there. But that's what one of the guys said that it tasted like, so now we just call it BFD all the time. But, you know, it's actually, I don't know. I like the stuff.
I'm glad he's acquainted with that flavor.
Hey, man.
You know,
I don't ask questions, right?
Exactly. It's mind your business.
Mind your business. Well, while I'm drinking this, what I consider delicious beverage, we actually have a first look at Ahsoka Tano live action, but I have to preface this by saying it's really not
what you think.
Yeah, it's not what you think. So there was this article that came out that basically was talking about we're getting our first look at Ahsoka, live action Ahsoka. What it really is, and let me put it up here so everybody can see it. So this basically is a drawing from the what was like Force Effects or Black
Force Effects
lightsaber. And what they did was they mocked up Ahsoka to look a little bit like Rosario Dawson, because remember that this is supposed to take place, I think, like during season 7. Like, this is where this came from. So basically what they did is they kind of drew her up what they think that Rosario Dawson would look like if she were playing Ahsoka during season 7.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, get a good look here so we can, you know, talk about this. So yeah, that's basically the first look that we're getting at all. Now I remember there was a poster or something like that not too long ago, right? That supposedly had her on it. It was like a Mandalorian poster.
Yeah, there was something like that that came out, but I don't think it was official. I think it might have been a fan-made thing.
That's the thing, you know, that's one of the hardest things about doing the show sometimes, because we do like to talk about, you know, current events, is that you got to weed through all this rumors, and usually we try to do a good job of putting it out there like, look, guys, this is a rumor, because this is a discussion show, so we don't always stay away from stuff like that, because it's not really geared toward we're not a Star Wars news show, per se. Mm-hmm. But we do talk about a lot of current events. But like you guys, you know, we like to discuss everything, even the rumors, even if they're completely unfounded.
Yeah. But you know what? With this lightsaber, though, what I found to be unique about it is, one, it does change colors. So you can actually select the different blade colors.
How many colors does it have? Or does it stay true to Ahsoka? Because she was only
Well,
white and blue, right?
Nope, and green.
Oh, wait, did she ever have blue?
Mm-hmm. She had white, blue, and green.
Jeez, make up your mind, girl.
I know. Well, she's a woman, fashionable.
Yeah, I know.
It's got to go with the outfit.
Well, hang on. Jason says those lightsabers are from the Clone Wars, not Mando time period. The costume also fits with that period. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying. The thing that was interesting is they made it look like what Rosario Dawson would look like if she were playing Ahsoka during the Season 7 Clone Wars period.
Now, I want to say a question, but what I found interesting is that it's only one lightsaber.
Is it?
Yeah, it's not two.
All right, hold on. Let's hold your horses there. Are you sure? No,
Well,
that's two.
In her hand, but I mean the actual sabers themselves that you're getting, it's only one.
Yeah, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah.
Like if you're gonna sell me the thing to be like Ahsoka, she has two blades. One is shorter.
You can buy two of them.
Well,
I mean, I'm sorry, man. I'm stating the obvious, maybe, but
I'm just saying that I found it
really,
to be,
dude, you want to be that particular about it?
Well, the reason being is because if
go.
they're showing her for the Mandalorian, would she have to? That's my question.
They're not showing her for the Mandalorian, though. They made that clear that this is not. They were trying to say, look, this is not Ahsoka during the Mandalorian time period. That's why they drew her up. They obviously drew her up to look like Rosario, but it's not supposed to be
From
during
that era.
that era. It's the Clone Wars Season 7 era.
But okay, if it is, then she should have two then.
Yeah, well,
I'm just saying.
Well, how much are they selling this thing for?
I don't know.
Well, look it up.
Wait. Sorry, it's right here. $224. Yeah,
Just
give me two.
down.
Give me two. $225. Yes, I want both of
For
them.
one? Man, this thing actually better, seriously ignite and cut stuff.
That's what I'm saying.
No, it's not that bad of a price. I've seen things go a lot higher than that. There's one that they actually had that you actually, I think I showed it to you. There was a lightsaber once that some company had made.
Oh.
No. That they actually did. So when I was a kid,
yeah,
when I was a kid, they had that. I remember maybe a couple of years. So it was in between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. So we're probably talking like 78, 79, somewhere in there. They came out with the first lightsaber toy, and essentially what it was, the blade was inflatable. You know, it's kind of that like beach ball type consistency, but it was white so you can actually see through it, and it attached to a flashlight. Seriously, all it was a standard flashlight with like decals that you put around it. And, you just like turn it on and and that was a lightsaber. But they actually had one though that was you had to wear laser goggles to look at it. Like you couldn't ignite it unless you had these like deep laser goggles on. It was hilarious.
Wow. Jason says those lightsabers are from the Clone Wars, not Mando time period.
Yeah, I read that one.
That one. Okay.
Yeah.
They could have used Rosario Dawson's look for the image. They really want to keep what she looks like in secret.
Well, the thing is, and that's what makes this really strange, is that we still don't know what she looks like in The Mandalorian.
No, we don't.
Because remember, they're making this image of Ahsoka look like Rosario Dawson without a doubt, but as she might have looked if she was playing Ahsoka back during the Clone Wars Season 7. So she's still wearing the costume, she's wearing everything that Season 7 Ahsoka. So all they're doing is basically going, okay, if Clone Wars Season 7 was live action and Rosario Dawson was playing her,
this is what
what it would look like. But we still have no idea. They're still keeping it a secret because we have no idea what Ahsoka circa post-Return of the Jedi looks like. And so Ronaldo said, which makes sense, it could be considered a spoiler in some way.
I don't know because we already know that she's going to be in it. So
Yeah, I mean, look, we know what Ahsoka looks like. I mean, we had 7 seasons of her in the Clone Wars and at least 1.5 in Rebels.
mm-hmm.
So, and they picked Rosario because, look, I remember saying
I said
ago,
that. Yeah,
years ago, I
Yeah.
said if they ever do a live action Ahsoka, if they did not use Ashley Eckstein, they had to do Rosario Dawson because they're so similar looking.
mm-hmm.
And sure enough, I guess the producers had the same idea because here she is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't necessarily think it's a spoiler. And the reason why I say that is because she's still wearing the season 7 costume and, has all that stuff. Again, we have no idea what she looks like in The Mandalorian. Now, the question is, do you think that the next trailer, and I think there's going to be one.
Probably like mid-October, right?
Yeah, probably. I would say, yeah, we're probably looking at another couple of weeks.
Maybe like around the 15th or something like that.
Somewhere around there. So maybe like a week and a half. Because I don't think they're just going to leave it at the one trailer. I mean, I guess they could because we're so close to the release at this point. But I think that the closer that it gets, I think we're going to start seeing more stuff drop. Now, I don't know if we're going to get, like a 2.5-minute thing or something, or if we're just going to get a series of TV spots.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say over under 60%. What are you going to go with that they show Ahsoka in the next trailer?
Maybe 20%.
So under.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to go under too.
I think that if they're going to show anybody, it's going to be Boba.
Or maybe Sabine.
Yeah.
Since arguably they've already shown her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we know that Ahsoka's in it, but I don't think that they're going to show her. Just like Bo-Katan.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's kind of weird because with this season, we know all these characters that are going to be in it, but we haven't seen any of them, or very few of them.
Right, and then you also have, like you always said, like, what's the big secret then in this one?
Well, I've been reading a lot of stuff that say that Luke could actually show up and make a cameo.
It would make sense.
Sure it would, because, they got the whole Jedi thing, and, I mean, it just seems to me like you can't really have the Jedi in this thing without at least mentioning Luke.
Well, especially like there's no other Jedi outside really of the
Exactly. I mean, sure, you can come up, just like with Ahsoka, you can come up with a bunch of Jedi that all of a sudden survived Order 66, which is another thing that I think they really need to be careful about this. Because it's sort of like if the whole Empire is out there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, I know you did make a good point when you said, because I was like, well, why didn't all these people just start coming out or whatever? And you're like, well, they didn't really know about Luke or anything like that. And it's not like Obi-Wan's going to risk communicating with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we're still, I mean, if you look at the original trilogy, we're led to believe that Luke's pretty much the only one.
Right.
And you pointed out the whole Darth Vader comment.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I mean, other than, maybe, okay, so you have Ahsoka that survived. We know that one little Padawan or whatever from Fallen Order survived.
Oh, Force Unleashed, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, no, Force Unleashed was a different game. Jedi Fallen Order was the one that came out recently. So we got some more chats, huh?
Yeah. Jason says, I don't think Sabine will be in the trailer. All the people that would be excited for her are going to watch anyway. Then Ronaldo says, I'm 10% that, and I think that we may see Cobb Vanth, the Boba Fett armor.
Yeah. That's a good point. Because, I mean, that's one of those things that I think that they could do fairly effectively is show, because remember, we got 2 actors playing Boba Fett.
Mm-hmm.
And we were still trying to go back and forth, like, well, is Tamira Morrison is he going to be like the outside Boba Fett? But, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to do that to me. Because they have, I think they said they had the 2 actors playing Boba Fett. It just doesn't make sense to not. I mean, unless Tamira Morrison can't. But then again, I don't know. He's pretty good in Aquaman, so I think he could still get around pretty good. I was gonna say if they had this other actor coming in to do a lot of the stunts, very similar to what they did for the whole the Mandalorian himself, where they had Pedro Pascal, and he was barely in the suit.
Right.
You know, they had like a stuntman basically doing most of the work. That I could see. But I don't know. And I agree with you guys. It's really weird that we know a lot of information this time around, but now they don't want to show it to us.
Mm-hmm.
So before they didn't want to show us anything. Now it's like they're telling us a bunch of stuff, but they don't want to show us anything.
What are the chances you think that if they do show Luke, like if Luke does pop up, Luke is the one who takes Baby Yoda back to his homeworld?
I don't think that's going to be the case because I think that there's too much story. Well, again, it really depends on what they want to do. Do they want to wrap the Baby Yoda thing up after this season and now he's on to his next adventure? But I don't think so because they referred to Baby Yoda as a foundling.
Mm-hmm.
They said, okay, just like you were a foundling, now he's a foundling, so he's kind of like a Mandalorian too, which would really be wild.
Wow.
First of all, how are you going to get the helmet on that thing? He's got ears that... Does it have ear holes or something? Or
it might be, or maybe just create one with the little...
Yeah, but that would... I just... Oh, yeah, like little slits that go up the...
Yeah,
I
Batman
mean...
ears or something.
That'd be adorable, man. Like Baby Yoda in like Mandalorian armor.
Yeah, but then like the... it's like the baby Gat, man. It's like this armor would be like...
Oh, yeah, I know.
You only need one pair of the belt car steel or whatever just to make his little fit, because it's like...
Exactly. It would just be like the one little thing because that's about how big the armor would be.
You can only carry so much, man. The dude is only like that big.
That would be the funniest thing in the world to me. But I mean, again,
especially like a Yoda thing with a blaster.
Oh, that would
because you're so used to seeing him like with lightsabers. So it's like you've never seen Yoda with a blaster.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, but again, I think that if they did the whole Luke Skywalker thing, it would be like, well, then it would be too prominent because I don't think with the popularity of Baby Yoda that he's going away. I think he's going to be in till the very end of the series. I don't. Because, I mean... Or
he might like disappear for a little bit and then like, in a couple of, seasons, but then might pop up and he's like older now.
They could do that.
And he like runs back.
Or they could do a time jump, like say between season 3 and 4 or something. They can end up doing a time jump or whatever. Okay, Jason says, the child would probably have a special helmet. Also, he would be older if he became a Mandalorian fully. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things as adorable as it might be to see. But hey, don't forget, even Yoda at 900 years old is only like 2 feet tall or something. So even if he is older.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's interesting, though, because going back to the High Republic, when you look at that Yoda, he almost looks like he's a little taller than what we've seen him.
Well, yeah, that's only because he's not hunched over.
Well, yeah, that's...
Anytime you really see Yoda, he's always kind of hunched over, but that's because he's so old. But during that time,
Yeah, but it just makes me wonder, like, how tall is he during his, like his
prime.
Whole... Yeah, I mean,
prime
right.
of his life.
I mean, for lack of a better term, yeah, the
right.
prime of his life. I mean, it just seems to me that, again, it's all these unanswered questions, like when's middle age for this species?
Right.
What is their actual name? Where do they come from? And you're right, it would still be so hilarious if they came from Dagobah. Like, if that ends up being their homeworld, like it's just on the other side or something stupid.
Yeah.
That would be great. And then Yaddle.
Yep.
Where did she come from? When did she get on the council? Is she around during the High Republic era? And then where did she go?
Yeah, definitely.
These are questions that I want to know. But what do you guys think about Ahsoka? How are you feeling about Rosario Dawson playing her? What would you like to see her doing in The Mandalorian? That's another question. I don't think we've ever asked even each other, but
that's all I want.
I don't think we've ever asked the audience this at all. It's like, what do you guys want to see her doing? What do you want to see her doing?
Fighting.
That's it?
Yep. I just want to see her, ignite some sabers. I mean, because she's a Jedi, man. I mean, it's like, okay, well, not technically she's not, but
Well, you know what? Maybe after all this, she decides to be restored to it. You know what I would like to see? Although you would have to explain her absence at some point because now she's not around for the sequel trilogy. So somewhere, she either goes back off on her own again, or something happens to her.
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, either or. I mean, if she decides to just go back to where she came from, or whatever, you can honestly say that's like, okay, you know what? You're Luke Skywalker. You're Anakin. You're my former master's son. This is your place. This is your journey. This is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, but I'd like to see her.
I don't need to be here for that.
But it would be nice to see her establishing the temple, and being that Luke is obviously obsessed with finding out all the stuff because naturally he wants to learn now that he has time. Because remember when he first started getting into the Force and all that,
he had to hurry up and get.
Yeah, he had to immediately hurry up and go face Vader and then eventually the Emperor. But now he can go and say, okay, let me find out. Let me find holocrons. Let me find these books. Let me find all this stuff.
And Ahsoka could let him know, oh yeah, go to these planets and go to these people. This.
Well, Obi-Wan did that actually. So in the Star Wars comic that picks up, I think it is after Return of the Jedi, but it could be between A New Hope and Empire, or between Empire and Return. At some point around that time period, Obi-Wan is talking to Luke, because you actually learn a lot more about Obi-Wan and his history. But he's kind of cluing Luke in on a lot of this stuff, and then he's letting him know where to find all these things.
Yeah, because eventually he gets to hold all the Jedi texts, obviously.
Right. So, but I would like to see Ahsoka maybe play a part in that, because it would make sense. Again, I think that if they just start doing things that make sense, and this goes along with something that you said earlier. Uh-oh. Your green light went out.
Yes. That's what we're talking about. Yeah. As we're talking about Luke.
As we're talking about Luke. Ignite the green. You gotta love battery operated lights. That means my background. But you know what? Still looks good, man. I actually think I like the look. But
he planned that.
Yeah, I wish. But here's the thing. I honestly believe that there are plenty of stories that they could tell that take place around the time of The Mandalorian or after, and all they have to do, which is what they should have done with the sequel trilogy, by the way, is follow essentially what you were saying. Instead of coming up with some sort of a checklist of everything the fans want to see in the next movies, take a look at the characters you got, identify what time period you want to do, and then organically, where would these characters be
naturally
in that time period, and what would they be doing? These are the things that they have to identify. I think that if they do that, then you're actually going to get some really good stories because, there wasn't mine, but it still looks cool. I think that this is one of the things that, honestly, that people really want to see. People want to see where these characters are going. And I think that one of the things that the Legends novels did so well is they clued us in on what the characters were doing 10 years after Return of the Jedi. They had Leia rebuilding the Republic. They had Han trying to find his place and all that, which they did mirror a little bit in the new canon novels, particularly with The Last Shot, which I actually think in some ways was better written simply because Han Solo, they had Ben, and, now he's like this domesticated father. He's basically like a house husband while Leia's, going to work and doing the government stuff. And it's kind of like, this isn't who I am.
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's like, okay, they have the kid, but Leia returns back to her natural element. That's where she naturally came from. And then Han wants to come back, well, smuggling is what I know.
Or at least some action-based thing, even if it isn't smuggling. But it does, and then he brings Lando into it, and he's kind of like, he's trying to get some therapy, he's talking to Lando, and then, of course, they get wrapped up in an adventure, but that's something that I think is really cool, whereas when you actually look at what the sequel trilogy did, I think it's checking off the boxes of what fans or what they thought fans would want to see, rather than a natural progression of where these characters would be and where these new characters might be. So, Jason says, logic is part of storytelling, not just creativity. Yeah, and that's it. It's like you have to look at where would these characters be naturally and logically. And this is one of the reasons why I don't think that...
That's why I didn't have a problem with the whole Luke being disillusioned.
That's just what I was getting ready to say, is that was a logical thing. It's just that the way that they did it, though...
Yeah, and just went on...
Yeah.
Too long, and I think people wanted to see the hero come back. I mean, he did eventually, but it still wasn't in the manner in which they wanted to see him. That's the part I think that sucked, was that, the way they brought Luke back, the way that everybody wanted him to.
Well, I think it even goes beyond that, because I think if you look at the grumpiness of him, you could be disillusioned without being, crotchety. And by what I mean is, maybe start him out that way, like they did, but then he kind of turns back into the old Luke. Like, one of my favorite scenes is when, R2 shows him the old Leia message, and he's like, no, that's a cheap shot.
Yeah.
That was one of the only times that we got more of an original trilogy feeling Luke,
Yeah.
And it made me crave that more.
Yeah.
Like, man, I want to see more of this.
Well, yeah, I think... I think that, the whole... the whole training part of it, like, you kind of saw glimpses of it because, like, okay, when he's doing the whole, reach out, and she sticks her hand out, and he's like, oh, my God. It's just like... And I totally get it because, like, he's so far ahead from where he used to be that he kind of remembers, like, oh, yeah, like, that's kind of... All right. But then he's like, well, let me have some screw with her just because.
Oh, man, that whole can you feel it thing? And he's like tickling her with the brand. That was just the
I feel
funniest
something. He's like, oh, yeah, you got it. Yeah. Oh, really must be strong with you. He was such a jerk for that, but it was just.
That was one of the best moments, though.
But see, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that was like a true Luke Skywalker moment.
Yes, and that's the thing. If we had seen more true Luke Skywalker in there, I think it would have been much better off.
But I think, once again, though, I think his fear... like overpowered that, because every time he tried to let his guard down and let it happen, something else happened that made him scared again. So like, okay, when he did that, and then she actually did start to reach out, and then, it's okay, powerful light, powerful dark, cool, like you're getting it. And then between it all, what do you see? And then, she's like, a force. She's like, and that force is like, he's explaining it. And then she goes to the dark, and then she didn't run from it. She just fell into it, and he was just like, oh, I've seen this happen before, screw it. Nope.
That was
and I get it.
Man. It's like, oh yeah, you instantly went to the dark.
Yep. You didn't fight it. Yep.
You didn't do nothing. It's just kind of like, here we go.
Yep. So he's just kind of like, I'm not dealing with this again.
It's like, are you sure you're not related to me in some way? Because
so there's that part, and then, but I think like once the Yoda part popped up, and that was like the turn.
Well, that I love that too, because, and that was the thing that even though there was a part of me that wanted to see the Obi-Wan, like, now you understand type of thing, the Yoda thing was great because now it's Luke and Yoda together again, but it's a different relationship because now Luke is a grandmaster at this point, and now Yoda's dealing with him more on a peer-to-peer level, but still has something to teach him.
Oh, yeah, because it's just the fact that Yoda's been a grandmaster a lot longer.
Sure, and he's experienced things, and now Luke is starting to experience the things that come with the responsibility of being a grandmaster and things like that. So now Yoda's like, okay.
Yeah.
It's not just you're losing concentration or you can't believe you can lift up an X-Wing. Now it's kind of like you understand failure, and in a lot of ways how a Jedi handles failure has a lot to do with their effectiveness and
overall just
and their command of the Force too. Because failure's a part of life, and it's kind of like a lot of times I think what happened with Jedi was when he brought up the whole fact that they're overconfident and they're arrogant and stuff like that. I think part of the problem is they lost touch with failure, and it was like I think that was part of the downfall.
Yeah, I mean that was the big lessons, because if you always remember, it goes back to the Phantom Menace. You know, when Yoda was talking to Anakin, he was like, "Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering." So Luke feared. You know, he had that fear, and he lost. And he even said, like, you know, like, because I was Luke Skywalker, Jedi Master. You know, so he's like, you know, he had that arrogance, like, okay, well, I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm, you know, it's nothing I can't handle. But he wasn't prepared for that aspect of it. Now he became afraid. And that's something that he hadn't felt in a long time. And then now he's like, okay, well, now that fear, he's angry with himself because he lost his nephew to the dark side.
Well, and I think he had because of the way
he hated the Jedi now, because it's like, well,
right. But I think a lot of it had to do with him, though, because if you think about it, part of his problem was the way he was introduced. You know,
Sure.
He was introduced right away. The dark side was extremely strong, and it was bad.
mm-hmm.
And I think that because of his negative experiences, i.e., basically being shot with lightning by an all-powerful Sith Lord, you know, and having to face these guys, having his hand lopped off by Vader, he knows a thing or two about what it's like to fight Sith.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he's a little overly sensitive when he starts to see a little bit of darkness, instead of just calmly, like what Yoda would have done, pointed out, hey, this is why this is a bad path. You need to make sure that you stay away from that. He just instantly like, oh, got a little darkness, you got to go.
Shut or
you know, it's like, ignite the green.
Ronaldo says, Ronaldo says, could you imagine the child's first words something like Sith or dark side?
Well, I could imagine. I mean, he's force choking Cara Dune. I mean,
well, he picked up that whole rhino looking thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, a lot of what Baby Yoda was doing is kind of violent.
Well, it's kind of impressive.
Well, it's impressive, but not only did he block the flames from the flame trooper, but then he shot him and burnt him to a crisp. So I mean, you know, Baby Yoda's got a little bit of a little dark side to him.
Little temper tantrum.
Yeah.
Then Ronaldo says, really like Luke's arc in The Last Jedi, because I think it was a great idea to show a beloved character, to show how failure is the greatest teacher. I agree. Cool to see how Yoda basically said, look, man, we screwed up in the prequels. Don't screw it up in the sequels. And then Jason says, confronting fear is the destiny of a Jedi. I love that line.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, too. I really did like Luke's Force Ghost appearance in The Rise of Skywalker. I thought that was cool because now he had learned his lesson. It was almost like he actually learned from his failure. I thought that it was symbolic, even though a lot of people didn't like it. I actually thought it was great symbolism. Then The Last Jedi, he looks at the lightsaber that he should cherish and just flicks it because he's so disillusioned and he's so just despondent and he doesn't want to see anything to do with the Jedi that he instantly just tosses this thing.
All right.
That now in The Rise of Skywalker, when Rey's going to do it, he's the one that catches it and says, no, this is what I did and it was wrong. You know, I think that was just a really great moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, the whole, I guess it's probably going to lead into our whole next topic, honestly.
Is it now?
Well, yeah.
All right, let's do it.
We're going to talk about, not that one. Sorry.
No, see? I was like, what
Is
is
it
he
really?
talking about?
Sorry. I was thinking about the other one. But
And
anyway,
you write these things.
my apologies. Anywho, but I think, look, like I said, with Luke, though, I think with Luke is his whole arc was cool. I think it just should have been either focused more,
Yeah.
and then,
yeah.
you know, if you're going to go that route, like, okay, really, I mean, I did like the flashback scene. He's like, okay, you know, this is what happened, you know, and I'm glad we got a chance to see that. I'm glad they put that in the movie where it's like, okay, yeah, I saw it. I had a moment of weakness where I thought I was going to kill him, and then I was like, no. But he saw me, and it's like all he saw was his master / uncle about to strike him down, and he freaked out and thought that I was trying to do. So it's like one big misunderstanding, and I think that's kind of what set everything in motion, which I thought that was hilarious.
And another thing that I thought would have been cool for The Rise of Skywalker is that even though I thought the Han Solo symbolism thing was great when he reappeared in Kylo's imagination, they could have done the same thing, but if they had Anakin appear to him as a Force ghost. Because remember, Vader was who he worshipped and wanted to be like. And even though he was starting to turn away from all that, the past and all that, if Anakin had actually appeared to him as a Force ghost, essentially said the same things to him that Han Solo, like, flashback or figment of his imagination or whatever said, it would have almost had the same weight. Because I go back and forth with that scene. On one hand, I think it's kind of cool that he basically gives the same speech that he gave on the bridge, but this time he's being redeemed instead of making his final descent into darkness. On the other hand, it's kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, if we're being honest, it's kind of cheesy.
Yeah, I think, honestly, what I always thought this would have been cool is if you heard, like, the whole, kind of like, I almost like a weird version of the Imperial March. You see mechanical Vader, like, walking towards Kylo. And Kylo's like, it's you. But then he takes the helmet off and he's like, no, this is who I really am. Like, I think that would have been, I think that would have been really cool and powerful because then he would have been like, okay,
They would have been a nice trick, though, considering that it's kind of like, then it would have begged the question, though, can you, because, Luke burned the suit, obviously. So how do you get a Force Ghost Vader suit? I guess you can just appear in any form you want, but I don't know. I just think that would have opened the door to, like, really, how powerful are these beings? And at some point with the Force Ghost, you have to go, look, if you guys could do all this, you really could have given Luke a hand here, or like any of these guys and started helping defeat some people. Because remember, the first draft somewhere.
Yeah, I remember they were talking about how they
were talking about how, and I would have actually enjoyed this a little bit more because I think it would have made a little bit more sense and it would have been a more fitting end for Palpatine, I think, is if all the Force Ghosts had popped up to help Rey and actually all faced him.
Well, I think that's one of the things, going back to what we were saying before, like, I think that's part of your training as a Jedi is that you kind of have to confront that fear. You have to face it. And I think much like Obi-Wan told Luke, like, if you choose to go against him, like, I can't help you, because this is part of your journey. So
right. But that's my point. That's what I actually think they should have. My problem is they overpowered the Force Ghosts. They're having them be able to do too much. I like the fact that they're powerful in the sense of, which, of course, honors the Obi-Wan line of, if you strike me down, I'll be more powerful than you could possibly imagine. I like that. I like that they could do stuff. Not necessarily, even though I guess as a fan I sort of geek out on it, but it's like if you start to overpower them too much, it's like, well, then why? Now you have to almost go the other way. Like, well, why didn't these guys, do a little bit more participation? Other than we're trying to teach them a lesson, like, well, we're not going to interfere, but we totally could.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. I think that's because it's all about, and see, I don't think they're overpowered because essentially you're returning into the Force itself. The Force itself is just super powerful, so it's like you can't be overpowered if you're a Force Ghost. Like,
but if they're limited, but if they're limited by the whole idea behind the Force Ghost is they're one with the Force,
and the Force is with me.
I knew it too. As soon as I said it, I'm like, I wonder if he's going to go there. But it's like they're limited in what they can do in the physical realm. So even though they're one with the Force, it's like they're not able to, because they... I mean, that's what I even liked about Legends. Legends, basically, Obi-Wan was like, look, the way that the Force actually works is that we can appear for a finite amount of time, and then we're totally one with the Force where we can't.
Yeah,
I kind of like that explanation,
and I get that, but see, that still makes sense, because it's like, okay, if I'm here for a finite amount of time, then that means that when I come back, I have to give you something that's going to be impactful, that's going to push you to that next level, so you can do this when you no longer need me. It's no different than a parent. It's like, okay, as a parent, you train your children for your ultimate demise. It's like, because I don't know how long I'm going to be on this earth. I have to give you enough tools that hopefully you'll reach a certain age where it's like, okay, I've given you enough lessons in life where you can integrate enough foundation where you can go ahead and just figure this stuff out for the rest of your on your own. But you have that foundation. If you're a Force ghost, I can see why you can be so powerful, because you have to still be able to show them, like, this is what's possible if you trust in this, but you have to trust in this. And I think that's always the goal and the objective, is that, I'm teaching you to fish so you can always eat, not trying to fight the battles for you.
right? And I get that, but my problem is that finite amount of time wasn't obviously happening, because you had like Mace Windu, you had Qui-Gon, you had all these like prequel era Jedi like talking to her.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you really think about it, though, like, I can understand Qui-Gon, but Mace and all them, like, I mean, and I don't know how, I don't know, it's a sign out sheet you got to fill out, before you go talk to somebody. Like, I don't know, or do they have like a counter, but I mean.
The idea that they introduced in Legends, which is obviously that's
Gone away.
more, but
Right.
that's the concept I liked, was the fact that it was a fairly limited amount of time. Obi-Wan was struck down in episode 4,
Mm-hmm.
and it was shortly, like it was in the first half hour, let's say, of episode 7, that he's like, okay, look, I gotta go.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're talking a period of roughly, maybe let's just say 10 years or less, that you can kind of pop in and out.
Mm-hmm.
So it would make sense that an original trilogy character would do it. So like if Anakin had popped up, that would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mace and all these other guys, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that they want to get rid of that aspect of it, but it's just like, it's just one of those things that it's like, if they keep getting these Force ghosts to be able to do more and more stuff, it just stands to reason that they have a goal and they have the ability to help. It's like, yeah, on one hand, you don't want to, it's almost like a parent won't do it for you, but they will empower you, and it's almost like a spotter.
Mm-hmm.
When you're struggling, you want the person to struggle,
Mm-hmm.
but then you kick in a little bit so they can actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you got the fate of the galaxy at stake, it seems to me like if they started to fail a little bit, that's when you would kick in, which is what they kind of did for the Rise of Skywalker. Was they communicated with her and, I don't know, probably like zapped some force power in and gave her some life force back or something. I mean, I think that's ultimately what they did. I just think
Right.
that it would have been more visual, a little bit more obvious, and also as an added bonus would have been a lot cooler if they had just all appeared.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying they had to be brandishing like Force Ghost lightsabers or anything
Right.
like that, but if they just like kind of appeared and stood behind
Or
her,
just kind of went like this, and they all kind of like lifted her up or something.
or
like
even
that.
with their arms folded or
Yeah.
something. I mean, just kind
Just
of
their
like,
presence is
yeah,
being there.
just the presence, and now she's doing it, so it's implied that they're giving her power, but to actually see the whole line of Force Ghosts, that would have been cool.
Yeah, it would have.
And I mean, I think it would have achieved the same thing. So
Let's
now we got
see.
some chats, don't we?
Yes, we do. Ronaldo says, don't know if it was Ryan Johnson's intention or maybe he was playing with the loose interpretation and Kylo's interpretation of what happened the night Kylo betrayed Luke. Ronaldo also says maybe
He was playing with a certain point of view thing.
Yeah.
And then he also says, wonder why it's never explained or Force Ghosts can interfere, even if they do in some way. It could be just a throwaway line, just a little piece of dialogue. Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, all those are good points, really, because...
Well, I mean, for that part, at least, I believe the answer to that is, once again, it's like, I can't interfere because, one, you didn't learn anything. And then, two, it's like, okay, now you always hear the line, you know, the will of the Force. It's the will of the Force. And so it's like, you can't go outside. Like, I can assist.
I think is more closely, because the way that Obi-Wan said that, it almost sounded like, look, man, even if I wanted to, I can't do it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I think it's, it's, the will of the Force kind of guides, and it kind of, and Yoda's always talking about the Force is always in motion, always changing, stuff like that. So it's like, you can't interfere with stuff that, like, the Force is only going to allow you to go so far with some things. So that's why I feel like, with that makes more sense, because then it's almost kind of like tampering with the future, if you were, because you're now a part of the Force, you know how things probably end and but you can't give it to people because now you're playing with time, and you're playing with,
Yeah, it's almost like the whole time travel paradox.
Exactly.
If you go back in time.
Yeah.
It's almost like you can almost inadvertently blot out your own existence or change some crazy thing, like kind of like the Prime Directive from Star Trek or something.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, that part makes sense. And I do definitely agree with that.
And then Jason says, most of the Jedi who spoke to Rey never became Force ghosts. Well, that we know of.
Well,
I mean, when you say...
Yeah, I mean...
We know Qui-Gon did eventually.
Sure, Qui-Gon's the one that learned the technique.
Right.
He's the reason why there are Force ghosts, technically. I mean, Mace, we know he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's definitely dead by that time.
And if Yoda knew... Well,
we know Yoda was a Force ghost because he was in The Last Jedi as a Force ghost.
No. What I'm saying is the Mace part, because remember, like, it was at the end of 3 that... he said, or, more you have to learn from an old friend or something like that.
Yeah, it was Qui-Gon.
Right. But Mace had already perished by that point. So did Mace know, did Yoda know to tell Mace prior to? See what I'm saying?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
he basically,
like, at what point did Yoda know to tell Mace? So by the time he does die, he could have become a Force ghost, or did he even know yet?
Well, that's part of my problem with all this stuff. They keep retconning everything. It's like, okay, if you establish the fact that Qui-Gon's the first one to learn this technique, and he tells Yoda, then Yoda tells Obi-Wan, and then on and on it goes, how are you getting all these prequel Force ghosts then?
No, wait. It just dawned on me. We do have the answer to that question. Because if you recall, Clone Wars, when Yoda went on that whole excursion, it was like a couple of episode arcs.
Oh, yeah, I do remember that.
And he came back.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll go with that. So Jason has a couple. He's like, do you believe in predestination or free will in the Star Wars universe? That's a tough question because they do seem to skirt the line between the two. On one hand, they hint towards predestination, but they always say that, the future is in motion. You can always change. You can always come back. It's kind of like if you keep going down this path, this is what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's predestination as far as they can definitively tell you what you're going to do based on your current actions, but you do have the will to change it. I mean, look, all these redemption stories are an example of that.
Yeah. It's just like how it is in life, though, and that's what's cool about Star Wars is that it's very symbolic or indicative of life, because we as human beings, like, we may be predisposed to something like alcoholism may run in your family or something like that, but you have the free will to make sure, like, okay, maybe I don't drink. I just purposely do not drink alcohol because I know it runs in my family.
Because I know exactly that this could happen to me. So you
exactly.
just stay away
so
from
I
it.
just stay away from it.
And then that's the free will part. So
Exactly.
yeah, absolutely. He also says, we saw Yoda learn to become a Force ghost. He did not tell anyone but Kenobi.
I don't necessarily can vouch for that one.
Yeah, I mean, that maybe that we saw, but it's kind of like you pointed out, that whole thing in the Clone Wars. It's conceivable that Yoda could have told other people.
Well, because you have to think about it. It's like, okay.
I could agree with that with Mace, though. I don't know if he really had time to tell Mace.
Well, I believe he would have, because you got to think about it. One, okay, in any type of leadership, and you know this, like from even you and I working together, like a lot of times you'll say like, hey, I'm telling you this just in case I'm not around or something like that. You need to know this information. So if Mace is your number 2 guy, you know, Yoda doesn't know, like, okay, something could happen to him. Well, Mace is the next one in line, so he has to know what Yoda knows. So that's kind of like, you know, that's the job of your vice president or your second in command, is like they have to know everything that the captain or the leader knows. Because if then in case that leader's indisposed of, for whatever reason, whether it's sickness, death, you know, family emergency, you got to know that.
Well, I think what we have to know, and what you're saying is implied, because we don't actually know really when Yoda learned this from Qui-Gon. We know that he told Obi-Wan on Tano 4 after the events of Episode 3.
Right.
But he obviously knew before that, before everything was falling apart.
Right.
So it is conceivable that during his conversations with Mace, he'd be like, hey, you'd never guess who I heard from the other day.
Well, I mean, you got to think about it, because you remember, like I said, that Clone Wars episode, you know, they kept trying to keep Yoda, because remember, he was meditating like day and night all the time, because he kept trying to figure out, like, how was he talking to Qui-Gon? Because that's what was tripping him out. He was like, okay, am I tripping? Maybe I need rest. Because I keep hearing Qui-Gon, and I know he's dead. So what the heck? And so then that's what kind of spawned Yoda's whole curiosity into this whole thing. And then that's when Qui-Gon appeared to him and said, no, go to this planet. And then that's when he went on that whole journey. He had Anakin break him out. Yeah,
they basically, what Lucas was doing, because remember, he's the one that wrote the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
He was pretty much trying to take that little bit from Episode 3 and, okay, here's what actually happened.
Right. And so then now when he came back, you know, you have like a lot of the masters who are like, okay, you know, well, Master Yoda, you broke out of the infirmary and you went on this crazy mission for what? Like, you got to explain yourself. You can't just, I just wanted to get out. Like, no, that's not going to fly.
It's like, yeah, there's a war going on, dude.
Yeah, dude. So we kind of need our guys here.
Ronaldo's got a bunch of stuff here. We have another Force Ghost plot hole. How did Kylo learn to be a Force Ghost? Luke taught him, maybe? You know, then Jason's like, afraid, not much there is to say about my journey.
Oh, that's talking about the line from Clone Wars.
Yeah, the line from Clone Wars. And then, of course, Ronaldo comes in. Maybe at some point in canon, the Jedi will become Force Ghosts instantly without any training. Yeah, these are all really good points, because the Kylo one is the one that trips out people the most.
Well, even Anakin, though.
The only thing that I could say, well, the Anakin thing, I think, requires more explanation than Kylo, because Kylo could have learned it from Luke.
True.
You know, I mean, or Kylo could have studied it. I'm sure that there, you know, at some point,
it's in the text
somebody
somewhere.
crammed in a holocron or something, like, oh, by the way, because, you know, we've always talked about, too, well, how did Palpatine and all those guys, were they aware of Force Ghosts? I remember we spent like a whole show speculating on that one. And that was the thing, and I think a lot of it had to do with Anakin, but you have to remember that Anakin was the chosen one, born of the Force. Well, so I don't think he would necessarily need to like be trained on it.
Well, and by that logic, then that means Luke didn't know, and neither did Kylo. None of them needed to know.
Well, yeah, I see what you're saying, because they were sort of related to the Force distantly. But Anakin, though, being a direct descendant, I think would get somewhat of a free pass. And even if those other guys didn't necessarily need to be trained because they were kind of related.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the information's there. I mean, it's like it could be an either or at that point.
Yeah.
But my whole thing is, as the DNA goes on and you're further and further down the line, you might be the great grandson of the Force. But the point is, it's been diluted enough. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we get some.
I mean, Jason's pretty much agreeing everything that you're saying.
Oh yeah, that is what Yoda says about learning to become a Force ghost. Oh yeah, Anakin is the chosen one. He gets a free pass. And Luke and Kylo are descendants, but they were not the child. Yeah. Okay, so pretty much right with you there, buddy. Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, I think that's... But again, these are the things that they start to open the door. See, this is what happens when you start doing careless storytelling, in my opinion. It's like you're giving us a little bit, but when you do that in something like this, and it's somewhat vague, you have to explain it.
Ronaldo says, if I'm not wrong, there's a book that explains that Obi-Wan taught him how to be a Force ghost seconds before he died.
Possibly. I mean...
Taught who, though?
Well, probably Luke, I would imagine. But I don't know when he would have had time. Yeah,
So,
if you know if you figure out the book, let us know. Because...
that to me, even if that were true, it still wouldn't make sense.
Well, a lot of it doesn't make sense. That's a
Well,
point.
I know, but
You know, it's one of those things, and this is the thing. It's kind of like the Force when they try to explain it too much. If you just leave it at what Obi-Wan said in Episode 4, and I think Yoda kind of expounded on it a little bit in 5, leave it at that. That's all we need. You start trying to get too deep into it, now you're going to bring up more questions and answers. And now it's kind of like, well, if this, then that stuff starts to pop up. And it's the same thing when you're starting to get a little bit of artistic freedom with these Force ghosts because it fits the story you want to tell right then and there. You're not thinking about what's happening down the line. You know, all these guys that are trying to tell a story, whether it's in a book, a comic, a movie, TV show, whatever it is, you have to be really careful in the Star Wars universe because you might want to do something that serves your story right then and there. But you got to remember that you're basically, now you're kind of cementing things for future storytellers. And eventually you could trap them. And that's basically what happened with Legends. They made Luke so powerful, they had the Superman problem. Okay.
Obi-Wan taught Anakin how to become a Force ghost just seconds before he died in Episode 6.
Oh, I think he means Luke, maybe. If Obi-Wan taught Luke somehow, or if what he's implying is that Obi-Wan appeared to Anakin, but...
Yeah, I mean, that'd be the only way you could possibly say that. Because my thing is, like, okay, Luke just learned how to deflect a bolt from a little training droid in 4 before Obi-Wan died. There's no way in the world that he's going to master, like, oh, I could cheat death now.
Well, especially with Obi-Wan, because he hadn't even learned how to lift rocks or any of that stuff
exactly.
until Yoda got a hold of him, and he didn't even have time to complete his training or anything. I think it still makes the most sense that Anakin was a direct descendant of the Force. He gets a free pass. All right, so now...
Yes, we got to get to our next topic.
Even though we've had this graphic up for like ever.
40 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, this is going to be really fun when I have to go back and try to, find this stuff when I edit it. I mean, I don't generally edit the live streams when I do the podcast part. But we have some franchise news coming this week.
Yeah. Let me find my... Here we go.
This is another one that kind of took me by surprise, too. I'm like... I wonder what it could be, because that's pretty much all we really know, right? I mean, just so you guys know, this segment right now is pure speculation. Now, if any of you guys, I don't know, maybe you've heard something, if you're chatting with us live right now, let us know what either you think it is, or if you know something.
All right.
Be sure to share it. If you're watching the rebroadcast, after you're done clicking the like and the subscribe button, leave in the comment section if you know what it is or if what you think it is. And it doesn't count, by the way, when they do announce it. And then you want to put it in the comment section, but hey, you're free to do it, but
Yeah, so it's a writer for both Star Wars Rebels and Rogue One has told fans some news for the franchise that will be coming this week or next week. I'm sorry. Gary Whitta took to Twitter and posted only a few words to make his announcement. Some news coming from the galaxy far, far away next week. Stay tuned, he said. Whitta has not offered any other news except to tell a fan who wondered if Baby Yoda will be coming on the show that the child's publicists are a nightmare.
Well, and by the way, I say this week because even though I know we're premiering this on a Friday night here, our audio podcast listeners will be getting this episode on Monday, which means it will be this week that we're getting the news. But I got to be honest, I'm at a complete loss on what this news could be. I have no idea. I mean, unless it's something about the Bad Batch series, because it seems like we've gotten announcements all the way through. So the fact that they're making a big deal about, there's some franchise news. Now notice, they didn't just say a series news or movie news. They said franchise news. So whatever this is actually affecting the entire franchise.
Maybe it's Kathleen Kennedy stepping down.
That's actually very probable because that would affect the franchise.
And they've been talking about it for like months.
They have. And I know her contract expires in 2021. Now, I don't know if they actually, if there's some date in 2021, but I could see that. I can see that maybe being the announcement. It's the only thing I can think of.
And maybe they're going to name someone else in her stead, and it could be like Filoni or Favreau.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me, I mean, I don't know why was it one of the writers of Rogue One and Rebel. I mean, it just seems like that's an unlikely source, though. That's the only thing that's tripping me a little bit.
Well, I mean, they would be in the know.
Yeah.
I mean, because you're still writing for the franchise. I mean, you got to know what's going on with the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
But for him to let it out like that, you got to wonder, okay, is there going to be backlash towards him? Or, did he let the cat out of the bag, prematurely? Or is it okay because he didn't say what it was or hint that, someone's leaving the Star Wars he didn't say anything like that.
Yeah,
it just,
yeah.
News is coming next week. Stay tuned. That's it. I mean, that's very ambiguous.
Well, and that's the thing. And this is the thing that's really funny is that we either get like a gang of information dropped on us all at once, or we get total ambiguity. Hey, we got some news coming next week. It's going to affect the franchise.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, that's, that's something that I just don't understand. I don't understand why they do that.
Well, I mean, of course, I think it's just to keep fans engaged.
But we're already engaged. Look at all the stuff that's coming out.
Well, yeah.
Then there's other stuff that we keep reading about. I mean, honestly, it's like every week, it's getting harder and harder, I'm sure, for you to come up with the outlines of the show because it's like, what of the 30 pieces of things that have come out this week do we talk about?
Right.
And the problem is, it's kind of like, will it be relevant the next week? And that's, I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, that's what I always think is like, okay, well, whatever we're going to address on this show, how relevant is it going to be for the next week or two? Because, sometimes it's kind of like a one and done kind of deal. And I would hate to ignore something that has more far reaching consequences than maybe some speculation or something that's squashed immediately.
Right.
But, something like this.
Lord. Okay.
Yeah, or well, here's a good piece of news that came out. So basically people have been saying, or I've been reading articles that Darth Maul is actually going to be featured in multiple series. Like a lot of different things. I'm sure he's going to pop up maybe in Obi-Wan, maybe in a couple other stuff. And it makes sense because since he was named the leader of Crimson Dawn, now you actually have an opening to put him in a lot of different eras, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Ronaldo says maybe it's related to the Cassian Andor series. And then
could be.
Well, I did hear that they got rid of the director.
Yeah, that's I'm glad you brought that up too because I was reading that not too long ago and it's like again, it's like
I know, right?
Really?
And then Boat Ride Family in comics. Maybe George Lucas will make an appearance in Mando season 2. LOL.
Or maybe he's taking Lucasfilm back.
Oh man, that would be.
I mean, hey, that's been rumored for a while. And it's a rumor that will not go away.
Lucas
and
comes back like Palpatine. All right.
Yeah. He's like all like suspended up on the like little claw thing. Like
He's got his hood.
Exactly. This is the final order.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, the thing is that I'm trying to think of things that would affect the entire franchise.
Yeah.
Because if it was like, say, the Cassian Andor series.
That affects the series.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that they would say this is franchise news. But then again, we already know, okay, they lost a director. It's like, what is with Lucasfilm and its problems with directors? It's like, why don't you guys just, I don't know, vet these guys out a little bit better? You know what I'm saying? It's like, you hire a guy, let him do like 60% of the project or whatever, and then fire him.
Well, I mean, I think it just depends on where they're trying to go with it. It could be some creative differences. Because, like, a person might start off one way and then, next thing you know, they're causing all types of havoc. And now you got a clean house.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or maybe this is, the result of a certain person at the helm who needs to be removed. And that's why some things are changing.
Well, I definitely think that this is more driven towards a Lucasfilm announcement, or perhaps they're going to say, hey, we're going to take a break for 5 years on the movies or something. Like something that's like really franchise
heavy,
yeah. But I mean, whatever it is, hopefully we find out before next Friday.
Well, I was going to say, we're going to be talking about it next Friday.
If it's big enough, it'll probably be our main topic.
Oh, yeah, more than likely.
Because if it's big enough, it's got to be our main topic. But
for sure,
if it isn't, I'm sure it'll make its way.
At least drink about it.
Yeah, it'll make its way into the cantina. All right, so now
comes the part.
Now comes the part where you're talking about. We put a little bookmark on there. So now we're talking about our favorite Luke Skywalker moment.
Yes,
almost forgot about this segment. Or well, what were you going to say? Because you were like, okay, well, this kind of brings us into our next segment, and then of course,
well, I was still kind of talking about the whole like Luke arc, so to speak. But I was just basically just talking about how just the evolution of Luke Skywalker, and
I got to be honest, this is going to be more difficult for me than the Vader moment, because the Vader moment I could just recall like instantly.
Yeah. For me, I guess it's
I know it's a scene in the trash compactor, right? I don't know.
No, I think it's probably the scene, I guess, where Luke is he's on Endor, and it's just the way that he's so calm. Like when they were like, basically like on a rotisserie, branch.
Yeah.
And he's just
3PO.
like 3PO.
It's like he was on Ludes or something.
Tell
3PO.
them, if you don't, if they don't let us go, you'll use your magic. It's like, just tell them. And then, the guy could barely lift rocks. Now he's lifting 3PO all over the place. He doesn't even have to keep his eyes closed the whole time now and really struggle. Like, he starts off with his eyes closed and he opens them, and then 3PO is still floating around and he's still doing that, and they're freaking out. And then just the way that he went over and just like the conversation he had with Leia.
I was going to say, that's mine.
Like that conversation with Leia is just like, you just see the growth and the true growth in him. Like, okay, he's a completely different person. Like you look at him there versus episode 4, and it's just like night and day.
Yeah.
And he's totally like, look, I just got to tell you this in case it something happens. And, he's like, no, you have a power, no, it's in you too. And, she's just like, she finds out that Vader's her father too. And it's like, whoa. So I think to me,
See, for me, it's going to be that one. That's probably my favorite. Another one is probably because I think I have 3 where it's, I don't know, it kind of goes back and forth. Depends on my mood. That's definitely one, though. Another one, of course, is the end of The Last Jedi when he's facing off. Of course, we find out it's a Force ghost. Force apparition or whatever, force projection of him, but still,
yeah,
that's a pretty cool moment, though.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And then, of course, the third one, which is in the mix, is the whole thing when he's walking into Jabba's palace and he's like force choking the Gamorrean guards, and and then he's kind of like, greetings, exalted one, and it's kind of, again, you could tell like, okay, this dude's like. He's like powerful now. He's all dressed in black. We're dealing with a different Luke Skywalker. I would say that these are some of mine. So,
Jason says,
let's go with the trying to lift the X-wing.
Oh, actually,
yeah, I know Ronaldo said something before that. We'll get to that in a sec. But trying to lift the X-wing is my favorite moment with them. But that is more of a Yoda moment. Well, maybe not. I mean, it's a Luke moment too, because. Yeah. Another moment that I can point to, if I may do a bonus one, is, again, it's tied in with my favorite Vader moment, which is when they're on the AT-AT and they're kind of like about to go see the Emperor and they have that whole conversation. And I chose that as my favorite Vader moment.
I thought your favorite Vader moment was the...
Yeah, the Force is with you, young Skywalker. But if you remember, I said both of those they're like true. Tie. I mean, it's hard for me to decide, but I think that if I had to make the choice, it would be that moment, because that's the first time we see vulnerability in Vader. He's, he's kind of wistful. He's almost regretful.
Yeah, definitely.
He's calm. He's like, Obi-Wan once thought as you do, and it's kind of like he's having a normal conversation.
Yeah,
which we had never seen before, not as Darth Vader anyway. So the Luke moment's kind of tied in with that. So. If you spin that now with the Luke lifting the X-wing, yeah, you could say that that's a favorite Yoda moment, but it's very much a Luke moment because Luke is trying to lift it, and then he can't, and then he just assumes it's because it's too big, it's too hard. He's not really seeing the Force for what it is. He's not relying on the Force, he's relying on himself.
Yeah, and
I think that's the difference, and it's the doubt, and he's not understanding that he commands the power. It's not his power. The Force is what's lifting the stupid X-wing. He's the one that's commanding the Force and using that to do it. It's a tool. Whereas he's thinking that it's him.
Yeah, like it's a muscle thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's almost a muscle thing. Like the Force is like a physical muscle.
Yeah.
All right, so now we've got like a ton here, huh? So, like, Jason goes on to say, my favorite Luke moment is him denying the Emperor, I'm a Jedi like my father before me, is such a powerful line. Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
Ronaldo says, my favorite Luke Skywalker moment, pretty controversial, is when he projected himself in The Last Jedi and saved the Resistance.
Yeah.
Because we always forget that a Jedi must use his power for defense, never for attack, and Luke saved the last few members of the Resistance without killing anybody. Very good point.
And I think he represented the Jedi as they are, keepers of the peace, not soldiers. Bo-Right family in comics. It's not a big scene, but I like the scene. Luke and Owen gets R2-D2 and 3PO. I'm going to go another one on that one.
Come on, Red, let's go.
I actually like the scene between Luke and Owen when they're talking about he wants to go to the academy, and he's like, but Luke, I need you for another or whatever.
Another season.
Yeah.
Ronaldo says, that's something I agree with Ryan Johnson. Use Luke in a more peaceful way and not with over-the-top powers. And then Jason says, lifting X-Wing is a Luke moment, but I like that moment because of Yoda's line. To me, it's a Yoda moment. No, Yoda's line was perfect. I mean, but I love the part, and I agree with you, it's still a Luke moment because when Luke first started lifting the X-Wing, like the expression on Yoda's face was just like,
yeah, like really?
Like out the gate. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay. And he probably could feel that Luke was powerful, how powerful Luke could become in that moment. And then once he saw like his mind, though, he was just like, oh, okay, yeah, work I still have to do, But
Well, that's why I think that, you can almost juxtapose that by another great Luke moment is when he, as the Force Ghost, lifts the X-Wing out for Rey.
mm-hmm.
I mean, I thought that was actually kind of a cool little... Again, it was a cheesy fan service thing, but if you really keep it in the context of the story, it was cool. I mean, it was like a cool thing.
Honestly, though, you know what? Here's another one for me, though. It was Luke just giving himself up to the Force and his cloak just flying away. Because he left on his own terms. Like, it wasn't because of a battle or he didn't, he left because...
Yeah, that's still kind of a mystery to me, too.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get that.
Well, and I think that comes up a little bit later in our show, too.
Are you sure?
Reasonably.
All right, because the only thing we got left after this one's a clear your mind question. So
Exactly.
I'm just saying.
I'm listening. I know.
Well, I mean, Jason says, not to cut you off, but, he says the twin sunset moment is also great. I just want to get that in there because, that's not just a great Luke moment. That's an iconic Star Wars moment.
Yeah.
I mean, when people think of Star Wars, that's one of the scenes that they think of.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. I mean, it is cool that he left on his own terms, but I just wonder what was the reasoning behind that? You know what I'm saying? It's like I don't know. That's kind of a mystery to me. I still wonder why that was done.
Well, I think...
I know, you keep saying that we're going to get to it.
Yeah.
So that's fine. But what about... Look, we already know Ronaldo, Jason. We know, and, Bo Wright family and comics. We know their favorite moments. What is your favorite moment? If you're not chatting with us live, if you're watching us on the rebroadcast, give us your favorite Luke Skywalker moment. We would love to know. Or tweet it at head-to-head-SW or Facebook or Instagram. If you want to take a cool picture of your favorite Luke Skywalker moment.
Oh, yeah. That'd be cool.
That'd be kind of cool to see some photos. And I'm sure we'll get some memes in there, too.
Mm-hmm.
Because some of those are really great moments.
Yeah, especially I love the one when he's the lightsaber. It's like, ancient Jedi weapon. He looks directly into the thing.
You know what's funny about that? Is that they just had an article about that today.
Oh, wow.
That scene is not in A New Hope, which I didn't think it was. Because I'm like, I would have remembered that. That was actually a set picture where Mark Hamill was on set and he was looking at it. It was not actually in the movie, though.
Yeah, because I remember he just kind of went like this.
Yeah, he just started... Exactly. See, what I thought that came from was I thought somebody froze it.
That's what I thought, too. Yeah, like,
like in
as the
mid-swing,
yeah.
Like before it ignited or something, and just try to make a funny thing out of it. But apparently, no. It was an on-set photo that somebody took of Mark Hamill while they were in that scene, and then it became, like this really ridiculous meme moment. But all right, we've had a lot to talk about so far, so I think we need to sit back and go into my favorite segment. A segment we call Clear Your Mind. That's right. This is where we answer your questions that you send in. Now, obviously, you guys have been chatting in a bunch of stuff, comments, questions, whatever, all night. But as something that we've done before we started doing this live stream, we take a couple of questions that people send in, and we feature them in this segment.
Yep.
All right. So who is the first question from?
First question comes from Todd Pittengale, and his question is, would Luke have survived if he had still been connected to the Force?
Was that the big moment? Was this it?
Don't minimize it like that. But yes, that was the question. And but you know what? That's
I have to ask myself, what's my favorite Daryl moment from this stream?
Oh, from this stream. I want to say, if you tell my ever, that's a lot. But
I know.
But
then I'd have to go back and listen to our shows.
But no, I often wondered that too, though, because Luke had been, he distanced himself or cut himself off from the Force for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, okay, with just doing something that profound and powerful too soon. It's like, was it like too
Was
much?
Kind of like he was a little rusty, and it's
Or
almost
not-
like when you get back into working out and then you pull a muscle because you try to lift what you used to be able to lift like 10
Yeah.
years ago when you used to do it all the time. That
Exactly.
kind of thing.
Yeah, that type of thing. Or it's like, if he just too, he wasn't, it was like too much power too soon. Or, or like I said, I think that in some ways he could have given himself up because he's like, okay, I have to make room for Rey to grow. And it's like, as long as I'm here, like, people are always going to rely on Luke Skywalker because why wouldn't they? I'm the
See, I
Grand
think
Master.
I think that has more to do with it. That it was sort of like in order. He probably felt like, okay, I failed. I did all this stuff. I had my day in the sun,
Mm-hmm.
or twin sons. It's one of those things that I think that he probably figured I need to step out of the way. I can be more help. It's almost like an Obi-Wan thing.
And he's always modeling himself after Obi-Wan.
Yeah, and I think it was one of those, I can actually help them more. Because if you think about it, like when Rey did her thing on Ahsoka, right? When she was about to throw the lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
What if Luke had been like in the Exegol battle? What if he wouldn't have been there to be able to have that teachable moment. But as a Force ghost, he can kind of pop up anywhere he wants.
But then on top of that too, it's like she probably wouldn't have had that moment because Luke would have been
Well,
right there with her the whole time. And that's
yeah,
what I'm
I
saying.
know. There's that whole,
Yeah.
conundrum,
So
that paradox or whatever. But I mean,
and that's why I love his line though when he says, what do you want me to do? Whip out a laser sword and stand down the whole First Order? Like, okay, yeah, I could do it, but it's just like, it's not like, and I think his whole thing is like he had nothing to prove. Like, he's Luke Skywalker, and that's kind of the reason why he was so disillusioned, because everybody looked at him as this all-powerful being.
well, but here's my problem. And again, this comes from, once again, the fact that they didn't plan the trilogy, that, you fire a director, you bring another one in,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have a mess. And one of the messes that they made is they try to retcon it like, oh, yeah, well, both Leia and I knew that you were a Palpatine the whole time. And you have Palpatine who came back, which, I'm sorry, but Luke would have sensed him. Maybe not when he was cut off from the Force, but definitely when, Palpatine was around, and then Luke had basically reconnected himself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, I don't know. There's a lot of plot holes, I think, that come from the fact that they didn't actually plan this whole thing out. And that's what, being the type of fans that we are, these are the kinds of things, because we not only want good stories, but we also want something that's neatly done.
And believable or logical.
And believable and logical. It goes back to, what Ronaldo and Jason and everybody else have been saying in here. It comes down to, give us good stories, but give us stories that would organically occur
Right.
through the growth of the characters. And I think that that's the most important thing. And if you do that, and don't worry about fan service. I mean, sure, George Lucas would throw us a bone every once in a while. He brought in Jango Fett, which is kind of like bringing in Boba Fett again. He threw Quinlan Voss in there. He actually named the world Coruscant. It wasn't called Coruscant until Timothy Zahn called it that.
Mm-hmm.
And so Lucas, when he made the prequel trilogy, decided to do that. He decided to call it Coruscant. So he's, every movie he would kind of throw the fans a bone and sort of reward those who have read the novels and stuff like that. But he didn't rely solely on that. He had a vision. Agree with it or not, it was a cohesive vision. It may have been poorly executed, but it was a cohesive vision.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that these are the kinds of things that you have to look at when you're looking at pretty much how the Star Wars universe should be characterized in film, especially film, because you only have 2.5 hours to tell the story.
Right.
You can afford to play around a little bit if you're talking about a series.
True.
But unfortunately, we're not, so...
Yeah.
I don't know where I was going. What was the question again? I completely lost it on that one. I think I answered it, but it was when why'd Luke just disappeared or whatever.
Yeah, and well, it's like I said, I think the whole connection to the Force.
No, I
like,
agree. I actually agree with your theory on that one. I think that you're absolutely 100% correct when you say, look, he probably felt he could do more good basically in Force Ghost land than
he had to get out the way so Rey can grow, and that's one of those things is that like sometimes you have to step out of the way so the pupil can feel the weight and learn from that. And the thing is like as long as you have the master around, so to speak, especially someone as powerful as Luke, it's not like he was just like a Kanan Jarrus or something like that.
Right.
Like he's Luke Skywalker. Like at this point, he's a grandmaster. There's pretty much almost like nothing he couldn't do.
Man, I wish we could get Mark Hamill on this show to discuss some of this stuff.
I know. But so I think when you look at it from that perspective, I think he's like, okay, in order for this girl to grow into who she's supposed to become, I can't be in her way because she's always going to depend, or I'm going to be that crutch. And so he's like, okay, you know what? But in this particular case, I have to save what's left of the resistance because she won't have anybody to fight. You know what I'm saying? She needs to keep some people around her, and she has Leia. And that's the other thing, too. He knew Leia was still around.
Yeah, and that's definitely true, too. I mean, with Leia still being around.
And she was actually a Jedi, too. Rey just didn't know it. And I think that's why, because remember, we knew that Luke was supposed to be 8, and then Leia was supposed to be 9. And I think if she hadn't, if Carrie Fisher hadn't passed, I think we would have gotten a lot more.
Well, she was supposed to be, because remember, she was the original choice of Yoda.
Exactly.
And I think that the way that they were characterizing her, we were going to find out that she was pretty much every bit as powerful as Luke was.
Yeah, exactly.
So, now Ronaldo says, I think it was because of balance. Dark side had Kylo and Snoke, and the light had Rey and Luke. Snoke was already dead at that point, so Luke was next.
That's a valid point,
I could see that. I mean, I could see that maybe it was Luke's attempt to put things back into balance.
Or to keep things in balance.
Or to keep it in balance.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be. That's certainly a viable theory. I'll tell you what I think is really hilarious, though. I really think that it was somewhat of a missed opportunity. And it could have been played a little bit for comedy. I'm not saying go slapstick or, Marvel or anything like that. But if you think about it, you're basically training a Palpatine how to use the Force, which could really have some funny moments to it because she's this like super powerful, Force user who doesn't really understand it yet. Having all those powers. That's why actually one of the things that I thought was the funniest thing was when she was all trying to basically bring that cruiser down, and she accidentally fries it.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that was not only was that cool, but it was actually the funniest thing.
Yeah, I was hilarious
in the world.
Especially that she's trying to save Chewie. And
she's trying to save him, and then she accidentally just fries the thing. I mean, I think that was, and there's all kinds of things that you could have done because you're essentially training a Palpatine.
Jason asked the question, if it was balanced, why did it take the Jedi 1,000 years for the Jedi to die?
Well, because, once again, it's a convenience. That's the problem that I have with a lot of things in the franchise.
What do you mean?
Well, for instance, the Jedi will use the Force for some things, but then in other things that would be super obvious, they don't use it.
Well, no, I'm talking about in this. Like, if it was balanced, why did it take 1,000 years for the Jedi to die?
That's what I'm saying. It was like, if it was balanced, that's my whole problem with the concept of the balance of the Force. Now, you could think of it this way. If you have a scale that's relatively short, it's not going to take that long to tilt it one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
But now imagine you have a scale that's like 4 miles long. It would take a while to swing it. So, I mean, maybe you can make the argument that the balance of the Force isn't always an immediate thing. Maybe it takes a little bit. The problem is that in the time period that we're introduced to, it's a pretty critical time.
Well, I think I think it took that long just because of the fact of, okay, the Sith had this whole rule of two aspect, and so when you really have that, and you have the Jedi who are trying to be peacekeepers and not soldiers.
So you think it was accelerated once the Jedi became soldiers?
I think it accelerated because, well, I think the reason why you had all this time is because you didn't have anything that was powerful enough to really compete against the Jedi.
Then wouldn't the Force be out of balance at that point?
It was. That's why, but it was out of balance for a long period of time, and that's.
Well, I think his question is why though, and it's
because you didn't have the Sith. Because they thought to be extinct. That's why it was out of balance for so long. But then that's why you had this whole. But that's why they always were afraid of this whole prophecy thing. Because you remember they were always worried about this whole prophecy the whole time. Dooku was talking about it. Qui-Gon eventually, being his student, was talking about it.
Well, and Palpatine was definitely aware of it.
Yeah, and that was the whole thing. And so, but the thing is like, okay, I think that the Jedi were just kind of like, okay, we have to be on guard because we don't know what's going to happen. So they're just trying to be prepared. But I think in their preparation, that's what caused the unbalance and their arrogance, because they figured, and that's what Yoda was talking about, the arrogance.
You're gonna have a field day with this one. So Jason says, to me, balance is not equal like in light and dark. It is the absence of dark and only light. But see, then it's not balanced, though.
Yeah, it's still not balanced, though.
It's not balanced because then what it would be, if it was absence of dark and only light, you could say, okay, the world could be at peace at that point. But that's not the balance of the Force, because the Force has both the light side and dark side, which by its nature would imply that if the Force is in balance, that means its dark side and its light side have to be kind of at an equal.
Well, that's why we have like 24-hour day and it's divided in 12 hours. It's like
right, 12 day, 12 night.
Exactly.
Well, at least in Hawaii, maybe
yeah.
not,
So,
not here.
not here. But you know what I'm saying? But I think like when you look at, like, you have to have a time for the sun to go down, and you have to, you know what I'm saying? So there's a time period, and that is balance.
Well, I mean, you don't even have to make any analogies to anything, here, because if you're dealing with the Force has a light and dark side. I mean, by its nature then. Let's see. He goes on to say, both Anakin and Rey brought balance to the Force by destroying the Sith. Why would balance mean equal light and dark? It's not so much that it's because of the fact that there's going to be the dark side that exists.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to exist. There's other dark side users besides Sith. Don't forget that.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when the Sith get a hold of the dark side, they just become like uber powerful with it, and they throw it out of balance. Don't forget what Snoke said. When darkness rises, the light rises to meet it. Even the Force is trying to correct itself.
Mm-hmm.
If you have super powerful dark, you have to have super powerful light. That's why when Anakin came up and he became super powerful as Darth Vader, and then, of course, you had Palpatine, you had to get Luke Skywalker up there.
Mm-hmm.
So
then he said, balance is not like a scale, but it's like a diet. A balanced diet is not equal amounts cookies and broccoli.
No, it's not, but it is, and maybe not equal amounts. And I see where he's going with this, because you got like carbs, protein, and fat, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like what was it, like 40, 30, 30 or something?
These are like macronutrients, basically.
Yeah, kind of like a macronutrient thing. But what dark users, he says? Well, you got the Dathomir witches.
Yep. You got
Yeah, the Night Sisters.
the acolytes. You had the Knights of Ren.
Yeah, they weren't really Force users, though.
Well, Ren was.
I don't think so.
I thought he was.
No, they were just like they're really powerful guys. But there was other, and even in new canon books, you have these other groups that do utilize the dark side of the Force that are not Sith. Just like you have a lot of guys that use the light side of the Force that are not Jedi.
Ahsoka.
Well, another, what they would call gray Jedi. You can't really count the people that were, but you have to remember that, look at Broom Kid. I mean, there's like, the whole idea behind the Force was that Lucas had established was you had a situation where, and this is why the Jedi would go and find Force-sensitive people, to pick them up to use for their uses. But the idea is the Force
chooses.
Everybody has access to the Force. It's just that the original idea that Lucas established was the Jedi just harnessed it a little bit better, and they were like a little bit more adept at using it more. And this goes in, of course, Jason, to your thing about where did the light side or lightsaber forms come from? Where did the Jedi actually took it and made it more
A religion. Or,
yeah, like a religion or a discipline, kind of like martial arts kind of thing.
Yeah.
So he's been chatting up a storm, huh?
We put a bee in his bonnet.
Snoke could be wrong. Let's see. Luke was not as powerful as Vader and Sidious at the time. That's true, but he became pretty powerful pretty quickly. In fact, he wasn't as powerful as Sidious at the time of Return of the Jedi, but he was pretty much
they were
almost as powerful as Vader. Dathomirians were dead. The Acolytes, the Beyond, were not Force users, and neither
but they were still dark side users. It's not a matter if they were alive or not. Dathomirians were still dark side users. That's the point. You asked the question if what other dark side users were there, not when they existed. So
exactly. So when the Sith actually became pretty much powerful, they would actually they'd have to rise something up. And look, you could find a lot of this in George Lucas's commentary on the original trilogy DVDs. You know, this is even if there are some dark side users, light and dark were not equal. Light was clearly dominating. And that's the thing. This is where they would go back and forth. And this is what always irritated me. Because I understand where you're coming from. I mean, I get it, right? It's like they would imply certain things, but then if you look at the idea was during the prequel trilogy, the dark side was stronger because Sidious was clouding the light side.
Right.
It wasn't just that the dark side was stronger. It was the fact that it was stronger and Sidious was actually actively clouding the light side. And by the way, this comes straight from George Lucas. Then what happened is that during the original trilogy, Yoda was using Dagobah as like a light side amplifier because there was so much life on that planet. And he was then clouding the dark side.
While masking his presence.
And one of the things that we see in the original trilogy that shows us this is when, Vader, through his family connection, said, hey, Luke Skywalker's down there on Endor with them. And,
and
Palpatine's all like, well, strange that I haven't felt this. Are you sure your feelings are quite clear? Well, that's because Darkseid's being clouded. But see, Vader wasn't. He actually had that family connection. So now we got Ronaldo saying the thing is the Jedi use the light, and some can use a little bit of dark, but not use it too much. Yeah, Mace Windu is a good example of that. The Sith use the dark side too much, and they cause imbalance. I can hang with that too.
The dark side was, Jason says the dark side was stronger because of Sidious, not the Force.
Well, but you have to.
He's still manipulating the Force.
Yeah, he's manipulating the
Force. The Force is still in balance though, so it's like.
And this is where you get even crazier, because like I said, I mean, remember our whole Mysteries of the Force program where we really delved into this? I mean,
right.
The problem with the Force is, first Lucas creates it, and in my mind, in Episode 4, the way that Obi-Wan explains it, perfect. This is all they needed to do. In fact, the more mysterious that you keep the Force, the better.
Right.
Then he decided to try to explain it too much.
Midichlorians.
Then you get the midichlorian thing where he tries to make it like a scientific explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get this whole thing to where the whole balance issue, where I still think that they really make a mistake when they get too caught up in this, because as everybody here is pointing out, what exactly is the balance?
Well, see, the thing, balance is not as, and I think a lot of people are confusing equal versus equity. Like, it doesn't have to be equal parts of this. It has to be equitable. So it's like, okay, is there enough light to counter something? It doesn't like, so for example,
In other words, 60-40 is okay. It doesn't have to be 50-50, right?
exactly, because it's no different like how we talk about, and I hate to, go on a political tip, but briefly, it's kind of like how, a lot of people are saying like, okay, men and women, saying like women want equal rights for equal, for equal work. And it's like, okay, well, men and women aren't equal physically, but you know what I'm saying? Like, we're still humans. We still do the same type of work. But there's that, like, okay, like a woman may not be as strong physically as a man, so she's not as equal in that, but you can still cause equity to make it balanced, if that makes sense.
Right. By what you do is you play to their strengths.
Exactly.
And that's it.
So I think, in some ways where we're talking about like the light side of the force versus the dark side, I think it's more so like, because like you think about like you have Sith, there's only 2 of them. They have the rule of 2. So it's like, okay, but you got 1,000 Jedi like running around. But those 2 powerful like Sith Lords are like super powerful, like super powerful. So yes, you have these 2, but then like 1,000 Jedi, but their power is still...
Well, and again, but you have to go into the Force. This is why I reject the idea that you have to look at the Sith and not the Force. Because what makes the Sith so powerful? It's the fact that the dark side of the Force is a quicker, easier path. It's more aggressive than defensive. Yes. That's the reason why 2 Sith can... Because the 1,000 Jedi won't tap into the dark side.
And that's the equity part.
Exactly, because... without the Jedi tapping into the dark side, there's certain things that they won't do, which give the Sith the advantage.
Yeah. It's like, people look at Batman versus Superman. It's like, well, yeah, Superman is super powerful, and he'll break Batman in half but he doesn't possess that in him to do that.
Well, I'll go a step further. Criminals look like they're more powerful than the police. Yeah. That's because the police will, maybe not always.
Watch it.
What they should be doing, the good ones, are trapped by the rule of law.
Right.
So, it's kind of like if they shoot somebody, right, there's going to be all these investigations, and they have to discharge their weapon in a proper manner and all this.
Exactly.
And it goes. Criminal doesn't have to follow these rules.
Exactly.
So the criminal is going to be able to do... You don't need as many criminals. Like, you can have, 4 criminals, take out all these cops because the cops have to follow these rules. And that's the same thing with, military type of thing.
Yeah.
Your guerrilla warfare. It's like if you have a proper military, as what happens, a lot of times they'll follow these accords and stuff like that. Oh, we won't cross this line, that kind of thing. Well, if the enemy doesn't feel that way...
yeah.
They're going to have the advantage. The Sith have the advantage because they don't follow a lot of these rules.
Absolutely.
And they use the Force in a very warlike, aggressive manner.
Yep.
And that's the reason why you can have, 2 Sith, and that's the reason why the Force gets all out of balance like that. But again, it's following the nature. So the dark side having this more volatility... A perfect illustration of this, and you've brought this up several times, all you have to do, if you really want a lesson in the balance of the Force, is just go back to that stupid Clone Wars episode that has the father and the son and the daughter.
Yep.
Right there, that will tell you all you need to know about the balance of the Force and why it got out of balance and what it means to be in balance, because the daughter was extremely light. Son was extremely dark. The father was kind of like
the pendulum, and
sort of like neutral, I guess. And he was the one that actually kept them in balance. And then, of course, it just all broke loose.
He was like neither, really. He was just kind of...
Yeah.
Jason said the father was light side. I don't think he was light side. I think he was just in the middle. Like in the middle in the sense of he wasn't either. He wasn't neither.
Yeah, because there was definite, you could see, occasionally.
Because when the son would get out of line, he had enough power to check him.
And he used it, too.
Yeah, he did.
Wasn't, and it was somewhat dark side-ish type power.
Yeah.
His whole idea was balance.
Yeah. And I think that's the balance is you have to know when and when not to do something. And that's Like sometimes you can't just be lily white all the time.
But it is a great discussion, though, because you have all these different, what would be the word? You have all these different expressions, I guess, would be the right thing to say, and explanations. Because you have things that were brought up in the Clone Wars. You have things that were brought up in the movies. You have things that are brought up in the novels. And as much as I love Star Wars, none of them really follow like a particular track. So the problem is, everybody can point to different things and go, well, what about this and what about that? And it's really hard to say. You know who would know? Filoni. Dave Filoni.
Yeah.
This is the kind of crap that Dave Filoni could probably answer like effortlessly, because
or Pablo Hidalgo.
maybe because Hidalgo actually like dodges some things once in a while. This is the kind of thing that Filoni would be all about. See, he's another one. I would love to get Filoni on this show and just do this whole Mysteries of the Force type episode with him.
Oh, that'd be my first thing. Like, let's start right there. Ground zero.
Because, I mean, you know, you guys are all bringing up some good points. I'm not saying that anybody's right or wrong necessarily, because you could find evidence that supports that. And for me, that's my problem.
Yeah.
That's my problem.
There's no clear line in the
There's
sand.
no clarity to it. There's no, you know, like you could point to this and say, okay, here's this. Maybe there is somewhere. I don't know. Let's see what I got. Let's see. He traps children on Mortis despite his emotions. He never uses dark side powers. Doesn't have golden eyes. His idea is balance, but his idea of balance is light. Well, in the sense of, and this is where I could agree with this, but again, it's a certain point of view thing. If you're talking about in the sense of restraining the darkness and controlling it, yes, because you have to remember that one of the things that they warned him about was when night comes, don't go out, because that's when the sun's out doing all kinds of things. If the Father's idea was light, there would not be darkness on that planet at all, because that's when the sun is powerful and that's when the sun is doing all his whatever. So it is balance.
What do you think when you? What do you think of when you think of of the light side?
Oh, I forgot about the Bendu.
Same
Ronaldo says, I think the only ones in the middle are the Father and the Bendu. Yeah, the Bendu, that's another one, man.
Yeah.
See, again, and you got, you know, the Bendu is one of those, I'm neither light nor dark kind of things. I'm in the middle. But again, it's defined. Is that truly balance?
So he says, so Jason's knowing what balance is requires knowing what light and dark are. Well, I mean, light and dark is based upon intent.
Yeah, and it's again,
intent and motive. Like, okay, is my intent to, so it's no different than, okay, am I harming something because out of defense, or I'm harming something because out of anger, fear?
But we know it's not even intent. See, this is the thing. It's the Force is clearly defined. If you do this, you're on the dark side of the Force. Anger, fear, hatred, power. You know.
The Jedi not crave these things.
Right. It's like, this is what leads to the dark side of the Force. Be careful or you're going to go into the dark side. It's not so much, obviously, your intent and what you're doing could lead you to the dark side, but the dark side is a very tangible area of the Force that has its powers.
Yeah.
That are very much defined.
I mean, it's no different
Mace Windu even, you know, says in numerous things, like he actually taps into the dark side controlled.
Yes.
Aggression is a dark side trait. There's traits to the dark side, but the dark side actually there's two sides to the Force.
Yes, it's no different than, like, you know, Master Bruce Lee once said, you know, I want emotional content, not anger. And that's meaning you do things with feeling and emotion, but you're not consumed by it, because then that's when you make mistakes.
Well, I also think if you think about it like this, if you have two sides to an entity, then obviously balance would be
It's like a magnet or like
kind
batter,
of a
like
balance in between two sides, a seesaw.
positive and negative, or whatever
Right.
you want to look at it. Yeah, I mean, light and dark, same thing. I think, like I said, I just think it's just all about.
But see, they're not clear on it. That's the problem. Even though
What?
there's a lot of implications on it, there are a lot of things in canon that sort of go against that. Because it's true. I mean, what these guys are saying is not necessarily wrong. It just shows that there's a lack of clarity. This is why it's such a great discussion point. This is why you and I did a whole show on it.
Right.
And I remember at the time we said, you know what? We could probably do like 20 shows on this.
Definitely.
Because it's just so vague that it just begs discussion. Because when you understand this stuff, it helps you understand the trilogy. It helps you understand the saga. It helps you understand the entire franchise. The problem that I have, though, and this is why I criticize Disney so heavily, is when you further complicate the issue by not planning anything and you're just telling these stories and you're not really thinking about it. This is why I got angry when Kathleen Kennedy, even though I applaud her for saying it, she said it too late. Like, oh, there's like, what'd she say, like 10,000 years of history in this franchise.
Mm-hmm.
We need to respect where this franchise has been. And I'm like, well, yeah, because Lucas actually did a really wonderful thing, however unintentional, of creating this wonderful universe for us to play in and experience stories.
All right.
In the comics, I'll tell you guys something else. The comics further confuse this stuff. You really want to trip and like balance of the Force and all that? Start reading the Darth Vader comics and all this other stuff. It further convolutes the whole thing to the point where, you know, there's what we know, there's what Lucas has said, there's to a degree what Filoni and all these guys have said, but there isn't, there hasn't been like a clear thing that actually you can point to one thing and say, okay, inconsistency. That's another thing that's been lacking. Where's the consistency in all this? That's the biggest problem that I have. And, you know, this is one of the reasons why I'm so glad that we have the people on this show that we've got. Because it's great to actually have people that love Star Wars like we do and love discussing it like we do.
Right.
Because, I mean, you know what? I watch other shows a lot of times on YouTube. Nobody's having discussions like this.
Yeah.
And none of the shows are attracting people to have discussions like this. It's all very surface stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so here we are. We are the home of the in-depth, really deep philosophical stuff. Speaking of which, we probably have another question, don't we?
Yes, we do.
I forgot, man. This is like clear. I'm like, what segment is this? It's like, oh, yeah.
Well, this one's easier to define, shall we say.
Oh, good, a softball one.
Yes, it's more like T-ball. Which Jedi created the Darksaber? And that's questions by Pete Newer.
Oh, yeah. It was that.
Tar Vizsla.
Yeah, that's it. Tar Vizsla. I couldn't remember. He was a Mandalorian.
Yep.
First Mandalorian Jedi. To my knowledge, he's the only Mandalorian Jedi.
Correct.
Jason Ronaldo, if you guys know of any other Mandalorian Jedis, please feel free to chat in. Jason makes another balance of the Force thing. Balance has consistently been achieved by defeating the Sith and making the Jedi and the Republic the dominant force in the galaxy. I agree. That's my problem with it. Because it's like it depends on how they define, which even Lucas himself said that it wasn't like that. That it was basically neither one was really dominant. But I can't point a time in the whole Star Wars franchise where one of them wasn't dominant. I mean, unless maybe post Return of the Jedi. Maybe.
Jason isn't.
Yeah,
that isn't a problem. It's
a solution. Kinda, but again, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. I mean, I think it makes sense to him simply because he's looking at it more like a balanced diet, which I can hang with it. And I would say that because I used to think that until you would get George Lucas saying contrary, and he's the one that created this thing.
Right.
So, I mean, it's kind of like, and unfortunately, other people getting to play in the sandbox, because once Filoni started to tell stories, then you get the Disney guys, then you get all the comic book guys.
Everybody's
It was a little
perspective.
easier. Yeah, it was a little easier when it was Legends, because then it was one of those, all this is basically professionally written fan fiction, unless Lucas says it's canon. And he would do that. You know, people would ask him things about, you know, hey, in this novel, this happens. Yeah, that's not canon.
When does George say that in the commentary?
Yeah.
The Star Wars.
Yeah, watch the commentary of the original trilogy, particularly Return of the Jedi. He brings up a lot of this stuff in Empire and Return of the Jedi. He's also said it in a couple of interviews.
Mm-hmm.
He said it in some behind-the-scenes stuff. If you go throughout the years, you'll see all kinds of stuff. And in fact, there's been a lot of fans, and this is what cracks me up. There's been a lot of fans that have said, well, he doesn't understand Star Wars.
Who? George?
Yeah.
He's the creator of it. How's he not
Well,
understand
the
that?
problem is, but I get what they're saying. You have to understand that the fans are...
That he built the world that the fans interpreted.
That's because George never really... He has his version of Star Wars in his head.
Mm-hmm.
But then all these authors and all these people came out and they did these books. He never considered, like, Heir to the Empire and all that stuff canon. Ever.
Well, he didn't think that was actually going to go past the first movie, quite frankly.
Well, right. But, I mean, the point is that he never even... It's sort of like there's his version, and then he sort of acquiesced to the fact that, like, okay, I get that you all think... You know, to George, it's like, guys, I think you're going a little too far with this stuff. To him, it's like entertaining movies that he came up with.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the problem.
Right.
So he says in the prequel commentary, I think it's the prequels, he says it balances the light side, which is selflessness. And that's the thing. Again, I would agree with that if it weren't for the fact that in other areas, he would contradict it. Other people have contradicted it. Disney, which is the new canon and the new owners of Star Wars, contradict it when they say when darkness rises, light rises to meet it, which implies a balance of both.
Mm-hmm.
And not a defeat of one or the other, that every single time that one of them rises, the other one rises to meet it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that happens in both cases. You know, the Sith are always, when the light side is the dominant force, it's usually been the Sith, but somebody... That's why I'm curious to see what they do in the High Republic.
Right, because you don't
Who's
have
going to be the dark side users in the High Republic? Or are there not going to be any? Because that could go to Jason's point.
Yeah.
Maybe we find out in the High Republic the Force is in balance because there's no dark side users to throw it out. Again, that's how I used to view it. I used to view it that if the dark side started coming up, then everything was out of balance. Because if you think about it, that's when the whole galaxy was kind of a mess.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could look at it from the standpoint of, like, you know, if there's peace, that is balance.
Right.
That's a form of balance, I should say. But then, like, it's almost like anything that disrupts peace is out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like you said, this depends on what perspective how are you looking at balance? Are you looking at it, like you said, from a scale perspective? Are you looking at it from equality versus, you know what I'm saying? There's so many different ways you can look at the term balance. And so it's always, and it's just subjective, in my opinion. It's always going to be like balance is subjective, just like right and wrong. A lot of times there are gray areas, and, you know, there's no clear, like, well, from a certain point of view, that is right. But then from another point, I could see that too. So it's just,
well, it's almost like the line, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter.
exactly.
I mean, let's look at, even if you keep it in the Star Wars universe, to a lot of
Saw
citizens,
Gerrera, yeah, like
the rebels were terrorists.
yeah, to the Empire, that's how they were. That's how they viewed
Yeah,
them.
and it's like one of the things that I think that they've done a really good job in this whole new canon era is by showing us a lot of it depends on which side you are. Victors are the ones that write history, they say.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's almost just like the whole thing with the Karate Kid. Like you start looking at things from Johnny's perspective. It's like,
Yeah.
well, you can kind of see why he would feel the way that he felt.
Right.
But even going back to, using that analogy, the Cobra Kai way isn't necessarily wrong, but Miyagi's is deemed to be more.
Well, you can even, if you look at it from,
better.
like, say, the dark side, part of the problem with the dark side is it's a quick and easy path, but it destroys you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look at that as out of balance. You could actually look at the dark side itself as being out, is like an example or an embodiment of the Force out of balance.
Yeah, I mean, look at Kylo.
Yeah.
Unhinged.
Everybody in the dark side ends up getting destroyed, and that's sort of the trade-off you make. It's like it's a quicker, easier path, and you can seem more powerful, but you end up being destroyed.
It's like steroids. Like I can pump a bunch of steroids in my body, and yeah, I can get stronger faster, but it's also wrecking, my liver and everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Seeing Jason's been saying he's probably wants to say, hey, finally, you guys are understanding what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that in the movies and TV shows, balance makes the most sense to me in true light, while outside of the movies and commentaries and stuff, it is confusing. It is not subjective. It is unprovable. Morality be subjective, but balance is not. And then that is what I'm saying. The dark side is out of balance. Yeah, the dark side itself could be seen as being out of balance. When everything is at light and peace, it is in balance. Then I would agree with that. Because you can see that that's just when things end up making the most sense. However, I would still have to say that Lucas and now Filoni, who seems to be sort of the keeper of the canon storylines, at least as it relates from the fact, and we'll see, maybe this franchise news that we're talking about that's going to be coming
this week, right?
Yeah, it could have something to do with it. We'll see. But you have to look at it from the standpoint of, even if something doesn't make sense, if it's the person who created the story and the worlds, they kind of have the final say. Because there's a lot of things that Lucas has said about Star Wars, and I'm like, well, I don't know, man. I get that you're the one that made all this stuff up, but if you look at it from more of a storytelling perspective, this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But all he has to do is make a movie on it, and boom. Then it becomes canon.
Yeah.
So Ronaldo says, if I'm not mistaken, the old expanded universe considered balance the absence of the dark side, but not the movies. Yeah, and that may very well be where that came from, was the expanded universe. And that's the problem with the old expanded universe, which is one of the things that I liked about the Disney aspect of it, is the fact that the way the old expanded universe thing worked is that Lucas basically said, if it's not in the movies, it's not canon. So what he would do is he would take stuff from the movies, from the expanded universe, put them in the movies and make them canon. Quinlan Vos being the big example.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I can think of, right off the top of my head. Coruscant being another one. Because he actually, I forgot what it was called. He had a different name for the capital city.
Mm-hmm.
But once Timothy Zahn came up with the whole Coruscant thing,
he just went with it.
So he would turn things into canon, but he wouldn't. It's kind of like he would license people to tell these stories, but it's like, look, unless I say it, unless I put it in a movie, not canon. This is just something that I'm licensing and letting them do. No different than the video games, comics, none of it. I mean, there's this whole great thing that Dark Horse put out where Luke kind of temporarily went to the dark side and not canon. What Disney did, which I liked, was when they said, look, We know we got comics. We know we got books. We know we have, animated series. We know we have all this stuff. Let's make it all canon. So from now on, they made a clean slate. Okay, we're going to call the old expanded universe Legends. And they still actually, much to my surprise, I didn't even know this, they're still putting out Legends books. I thought it was just the old expanded universe, they deemed it Legends, and then they moved on. But they're coming up with like these alternate universe stories that they just put in Legends. So that's kind of cool.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. So Jason says, I don't know as much about behind-the-scenes stuff, but from what I've heard, they agree with the dark, out-of-balance idea. Yeah, there's a lot of things in totality you have to take into consideration. A lot of stuff. Which is like the more that you follow the stuff, the more frustrated you get about it. The best thing to do is just whatever it is you want to get out of it, there's something in the Star Wars universe that will support it. So if you're more the type of person that says, hey, I think that the absence of dark side means it's in balance, you'll find evidence of that. If you're one of the people that think it's more like a scale, you'll find evidence of that too. And then had Abaddon was Coruscant original name. Yeah, you know what? I think you're right, actually. Yeah, I think that was it. I'm trying to remember where it was even from. I think it was like Shadows of the Empire or something. Yeah, they're still publishing Legends, Ronaldo, which is cool. I didn't know that either. It was funny. So then the second question that we had, it was like the whole Darksaber thing, the Mandalorian guy.
Yeah, we've answered that one already. That was this Tar Vizsla.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that's interesting about that, though, is I wonder if we're going to get any of this stuff in any of the later seasons of The Mandalorian.
You're probably definitely going to mention it, of course. You got to mention them.
Well, especially since you brought the Darksaber into it.
Yeah, I mean, you got to mention them because people, especially casual fans, will know what the heck that is anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's it, that I think that you have to not only deal with that, but you have to maybe, I'm hoping what they do, again, maybe it's wishful thinking on my part, but I'm really hoping that what they do is they actually take some stuff from, say, like this first Mandalorian Jedi Tar Vizsla, right? And give us some backstory in The Mandalorian, but maybe spin it off. Like maybe they do an Old Republic thing and they actually put the character in. Maybe they do some tie-in novels.
Yeah, it could possibly happen.
Yeah,
I
would.
If they go back far enough.
I would love to see stuff like that. Because those are the kinds of things that I think that would be nice. I mean, I don't need to see a Yoda origin story. I don't need to see, a lot of these standalone. I would like to see a standalone Palpatine thing, though. But other than something big like that, I would just much rather, we have something that ties in, but something that's interesting. And that would actually be the most interesting thing. But all right, I think that's going to wrap up our show. We've been going for a while, but you guys have been hanging out with us the whole time, and we really appreciate that. It's like we've had some great discussions on here. We've had some, really cool news that we've been able to discuss. This is basically what we like to do. So if you like what you've seen here, that's great. Don't forget to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button so you know when we go on the air all the time. We are definitely going to make some more Star Wars content eventually. I know I keep saying that every week, but it is coming. I promise. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you guys want to help support the channel, there is a link to donate to the channel so that way we can keep bringing this stuff to you. You can also hit us up at Head to Head SW on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And we'll keep bringing this stuff to you. Tell your friends, share the videos, and, let's build this community. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.